Chapter 374. Master. Harley's tone sounded a little worried. His pair of dark eye sockets kept following Han Jin. Ever since he rescued Schumann and learned some bad news, Han Jin had been pacing back and forth in the room. He could see that his master was in a bad mood. "You can leave first." Han Jin waved his hand. "Don't disturb me." "Understood, master." Harley obediently floated to the door, pushed it open, and flashed out. Han Jin's brows were knitted together. Fate had never let him relax. The threat of Forza, the leader of the orcs, had yet to be eliminated. Chasam of Cold Shadow City was still eyeing him from the north. Dragon City and Dragon City were like two huge dark clouds, blocking the sky that belonged to him. Nicholas of the Southwest District had been rapidly expanding and strengthening his forces. Not only that, but the great demon Donald had also quietly reached out his hand. Han Jin really couldn't relax. In just a few years, he had defeated the infamous Zagund and Dismark of the Holy Crown City. This kind of record was enough for any expert to be proud of. However, Han Jin didn't have the time to show his pride. His opponents were getting more and more powerful. To put it nicely, this was the tempering of fate. To put it bluntly, this was a kind of torture. Harley floated across the promenade. He had just appeared on the deck when Guevara, who was sitting on a chair, asked in a nonchalant tone, "What's wrong with you guys?" Look at Raphael's expression. Something's wrong. Harley sighed. He knew that Guevara was very concerned about Han Jin. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so impatient to ask him, "What's wrong?" Guevara's expression became serious. Just as Lei was about to speak, he suddenly raised his skull. His eye sockets flashed red. Only 3 people could control the god of war. Of course, if Lei could be considered as a person, then with the help of his Dao techniques, Lei's senses were much sharper than the rest of the people on the ship. A figure descended from the sky. His target was the god of war. During non-war periods, the god of war was always anchored at the side or above the city hall of the Holy Crown City. The former was during the day, so that it was convenient for people to get on and off the ship. The latter was during the night, so as to maintain vigilance. At this moment, the god of war was about 10 meters above the city hall's roof. In addition to the height of the god of war itself, they were almost 100 meters above the ground. However, the figure fell from thousands of meters above the ground. The question was, how did he come to the top of the god of war? Guevara and Majordomo Gale also noticed the anomaly and looked up at the sky at the same time. Harley quickly sat on a main seat and shouted, "Hogan, get ready." "Wait," Morrison said. "He might not mean any harm. I don't care if he has ill intentions or not. Let's beat him up first." If Han Jin was unhappy, Lei would naturally be unhappy as well. Now that he had found a channel to vent his anger, he naturally wouldn't let it go. "He's too far away. I can't lock onto him with my mental power," Hogan said anxiously. "Use the magic crystal cannons." "Magic crystal cannons? Isn't that like shooting a mosquito with a longbow?" Hogan smiled bitterly. "Then how many magic crystals do I have to use?" Lei was speechless. What Hogan said was reasonable. It was not easy to use the magic crystal cannons to blow up a person. Was he going to use hundreds of cannons? Would Han Jin let him go when he saw him wasting so many magic crystals? "I'll do it." Dominique stood up with a smile. "Great." Lei was immediately overjoyed. When it came to long-range attacks, the Titans were superior to all other races. Elven archers couldn't do it, human magicians couldn't do it, and even the mountain giants of the orcs couldn't do it. Dominique raised her head, and her pupils gradually turned silver-white. She slowly drew back her right hand, and balls of lightning swam and vibrated in her palm. An extremely violent wave spread out from her palm. In an instant, all the professionals on the god of war, including those in the Holy Crown City, felt this wave. The next moment, Dominique made a crisp sound and waved her right hand upward. A thick bolt of lightning flew out of her hand and shot up into the sky with an unstoppable momentum. It was not an ordinary bolt of lightning. Lightning was irregular, but Dominique's bolt of lightning was very uniform. It looked like a meteor leaving a long comet tail. That person was not afraid at all. He directly faced the bolt of lightning. The people below couldn't see his movements because of the lightning. They only knew that a collision was about to happen. With a loud bang, Dominique's bolt of lightning was smashed into pieces. A brilliant firework made entirely of lightning bloomed in the sky, covering an area of hundreds of meters. The light produced by the explosion was even brighter than the sun. Then, the figure had already passed through the firework and continued to fall down. Dominique raised her eyebrows and clenched her right hand again. She didn't use her full strength because she didn't know whether the person was a friend or a foe. However, her attack was easily smashed by the person, which hurt the self-esteem of a Thunder Titan. But at this moment, Little Gold Thunder couldn't wait any longer. He let out a high-pitched cry and hurriedly flapped his wings to meet the person in the sky. The rest of the little Thunderbirds saw that their leader had taken action, so they all flew away from the ship. Dominique had to slowly release her right fist. Although the Thunderbirds had strong resistance to lightning magic, Dominique knew that Hanjin loved them very much. If she accidentally hurt some of them, she wouldn't be able to explain it. Come back. All of you come back. Hogan was so anxious that he stomped his feet. Unfortunately, other than Hanjin and Sunir, the little ones didn't like to listen to others. Plus, Little Gold Thunder had a strong sense of territory. Last time, when the Beastmen's Thunderbirds invaded their territory, Little Gold Thunder would desperately fly out to fight. Now that a person had appeared above their heads, it was even more intolerable. So, none of the 100 little ones turned back. They all desperately flapped their wings to meet the person. Almost at the same time, hundreds of lightning bolts tore through the sky and finally merged together, crashing into the figure. The figure had already been swallowed by the scorching white, but in the next moment, he miraculously passed through the lightning and continued to fall down. Guevara, Majordomo Gale, and the others' expressions became serious. It was obvious that the opponent had an unimaginable magic defense. If he had a matching attack power, he would be a huge threat to everyone. Coincidentally, the strong people around Hanjin all had the same attributes. Guevara mastered the lightning fighting technique. Dominique was a Thunder Titan, and Yelena was a Lightning Magus. Since Dominique and the Little One's attacks didn't have any effect, then Guevara's attacks might not be any better. However, he had no other choice. He reached out and picked up his dragon spear. After all, the Little Ones weren't properly trained soldiers. The first round of attacks was quite orderly, but as the enemy got closer and closer, the rhythm of their attacks became messy. Bolts of lightning bloomed one after another. Although they looked fierce, their actual attack power was greatly reduced. That figure continued to fly downwards. Streaks of lightning landed on his body and turned into electric arcs that flowed in all directions. However, he looked as if nothing had happened. That indomitable momentum of his seemed to be flamboyant and sharp. Little Gold Bolt let out a crisp chirp and continued to fly up. He also knew that lightning was useless, so he decided to use his sharp claws and sharp beak to end the battle completely. The rest of the Thunderbirds followed behind Little Gold Bolt. Suddenly, an angry roar came from above. The roar was filled with an inexplicable power. The attack of the Thunderbirds was instantly disrupted. Even Little Gold Bolt turned into a group of headless flies, flying around in all directions. The roar finally hit the God of War. Everyone on the ship could feel that the ship's hull seemed to tremble. Guevara's eyes were cold, and he raised his dragon spear upwards. Dominique took a deep breath, and a bolt of lightning exploded in her palm. Then, it turned into countless electric arcs, almost wrapping her tall body in it. Harley also let out a scream, and his body quickly collapsed inwards, turning into a black bead. When the figure was less than 100 meters away from the God of War, the figure suddenly stopped and hovered in the air. Then a long voice sounded, "Don't misunderstand. I don't have any bad intentions." The distance between the two parties was very close. Guevara and the others could clearly see the other party's appearance. It was a middle-aged man around 40 years old. His appearance was a little strange. He had a pair of long eyebrows, and the tips of his eyebrows were very long. Coupled with the protruding brow bone, his eyes were very deep. Even from 100 meters away, they could see that his eyes were flashing with a sharp light. However, he was not looking at Guevara, Dominique, or Harley. He was staring at Han Jin, who had just walked up from below. "You are Lord Raphael?" The long voice sounded again. "Who are you?" Han Jin said coldly. "Aren't you going to invite me down for a seat? Isn't it a little impolite to treat a guest like this?" The man ignored Han Jin's indifference and smiled. "Guest?" Han Jin sneered and then shouted, "All of you come back here." The thunderbirds that were scurrying around heard Han Jin's call and flew back from all directions. The other thunderbirds were fine, but when little gold bolt landed on the side of the ship, it staggered and fell onto the deck involuntarily. It then struggled to get up and let out a low cry of grievance. Han Jin dashed forward and placed his hand on little gold bolt's body. It seemed that little gold bolt was trying its best to stand firm, but it couldn't. It staggered and staggered. It was obvious that it had suffered serious injuries. Han Jin slowly raised his head and stared at the uninvited guest. His eyes were filled with murderous intent that he didn't want to hide. It was deep and strong, and even his face was distorted. Guevara and the others were dumbfounded. They had known Han Jin for a long time, but they had never seen Han Jin lose his composure like this. That person was also tongue-tied. He did not understand. In fact, he had already been merciful. That extremely powerful Thunderbird should not have been so weak. Could it be that it had been injured because it had forcibly resisted his power? Harley was suddenly stunned and let out a cry of surprise. However, at this time, no one noticed him. "Guest," Han Jin gritted his teeth and said. Then, his figure disappeared from the spot. The next moment, he appeared more than 20 meters in front of the man. "Die!" Following Han Jin's shout, a torrent of mental strength shot out and roared towards the man. The man stretched out his hand, and a magic shield was instantly released, firmly shrouding him in it. With a loud bang, the fist force collided with the magic shield and turned into countless chaotic streams of energy that swept in all directions. The magic shield also turned into a bubble in the wind, constantly twisting, but in the end, it did not collapse. "Wait!" The man shouted anxiously. "Wait for your mother." Han Jin's face became more and more ferocious. He slowly pushed his hands forward, and one after another, long swords with red light appeared in the air. "Oh my God!" Harley jumped up crazily, as if someone had stepped on his tail. "Master is going to release a super forbidden spell. Let's go. Otherwise, no one will live." After saying that, he suddenly rushed to the main seat. The god of war slowly accelerated and dodged to the side. "Raphael, what are you doing?" Guevara was so scared that his face turned pale. "The Holy Crown City is below us." Although he still couldn't understand why Han Jin was so out of control, at this moment, he didn't have time to think about it. The most important thing was to stop the tragedy that was about to happen. "Raphael." The man also showed a shocked expression. He heard Harley scream and saw the panicked expression of Guevara and the others. "I'm from the elemental capital. I'm from the elemental capital." Hearing the shout, Han Jin's movements obviously paused for a moment. He looked at the man coldly. "Grand Duke Solomon should have introduced me to you," the man said anxiously. "I'm from the Dragon Field, one of the guardians of the Dragon Field. We are not enemies." "Who are you?" Han Jin asked word by word. "My name is Shazos." The man was still nervously staring at the row of flying swords more than 10 meters away. He didn't dare to let his guard down. One must know that Dragon City's Elder Maxwell was killed by this young man in front of him when he had the absolute advantage. He didn't doubt that this young man also had the ability to cause him unbearable damage. Han Jin's expression was uncertain. He then disappeared in front of the man and appeared on the deck. He gently patted Little Gold Lightning and walked towards the stairs. Little Gold Lightning hurriedly limped behind Han Jin. As for the uninvited guest above, he was left hanging in the air by Han Jin. Seeing that Han Jin had disappeared, the man's expression was very helpless. He wanted to be angry, but he didn't come here to throw a tantrum. He wanted to turn around and leave, but he couldn't leave before the matter was settled. He wanted to land on the ship, but no one invited him. His self-esteem was much stronger than an ordinary life. While muttering to himself, He couldn't help but think of the conversation he had with Grand Duke Solomon when he left the elemental capital. Grand Duke Solomon was very frank. He said that Raphael was a very, very promising young man. This was also the main reason why he had entrusted Yelena to Raphael. However, no one was perfect. Raphael also had a weakness, which was that he liked to act impulsively. But this was nothing, as most young people had the same problem. As time passed, he believed that Raphael would become more and more mature. However, from the analysis of what had just happened, how could it be said that he liked to act impulsively? He was simply irritable. Chazos didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Was he really going to cooperate with such a young man? Chazos didn't know what to do, but Guevara knew. When he knew that the other party was the guardian of the Dragon Realm, he immediately reacted. Han Jin had killed Dragon City's Elder Maxwell. Although everyone was proud of Han Jin's strength, they also knew that they were facing a serious threat. What if Dragon City decided to take revenge? With their current strength, they were definitely no match for Dragon City. Even someone as strong as Nicholas had to rely on the protection of the Dragon Realm, let alone them. Now that the guardian of the Dragon Realm, Chazos, had appeared here, Guevara saw hope. If he could win the friendship of the Dragon Realm, then it would be Dragon City's turn to be anxious. Elder Chazos, I've heard a lot about you, Guevara said loudly. If you don't have anything urgent, why don't you come down and have a seat? Hearing that someone was giving him a way out, Chazos felt a lot more relaxed. He slowly floated down and looked at Guevara with a smile. If I'm not wrong, you should be Guevara's knight? That's right, huh? Guevara stepped aside. Please. Seeing that there was nothing else, Dominique, who didn't like to socialize, silently glanced at Chazos and sat on the deck. She was too lazy to introduce herself, and she was even too lazy to listen to others introduce themselves. Guevara was a little surprised. He didn't expect that his simple invitation would make Dominique use it to get close to him. Logically speaking, Han Jin didn't give Dominique any face at all and even cursed him. According to the nature of the giant dragons, Dominique should have been furious. There must be a reason for this abnormality. Dominique should have something very important that required their help. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been so humble and humiliated. Majordomo Gale also had doubts. From the capital of elements? This should have something to do with Grand Duke Solomon. But why did Grand Duke Solomon ask this noble guardian of the Dragon Realm to come to the Holy Crown City? At this moment, 3 girls rose from the side of the ship. Yelena was the first to land on the deck. She glanced at Chazos. Seeing that no one was hostile, she hurriedly asked, "What's wrong? What the hell is going on?" "Nothing, just a little misunderstanding," Guevara said with a smile. "Yelena, go down and have a look," Dominique said lightly. "Down." Little Gold Lightning is injured. Other than Han Jin, Dominique was probably the most upset one. Because of her height, she couldn't rest in the cabin below. She could only live on the deck for the time being. She had nothing to do on weekdays, so she was very familiar with the little guys. The little guys liked the aura of electric elements, so they didn't reject Dominique. "What? Little Gold Lightning is injured?" Yelena exclaimed and hurriedly ran down the deck. Leslie and Lorraine also followed behind her. "Little Gold Lightning is..." Chazos didn't understand. "It's that Thunderbird. Hee. Raphael has always spoiled it and even treated it as his own child. So that's how it is." Chazos suddenly understood. Chapter 375. Master, what if he's not afraid at all? Harley had some understanding of Han Jin's fighting style. He knew that flying swords could hardly hurt a superclass master. A gentleman can be bullied. Han Jin said calmly. At this moment, his face was very calm. The anger and impulsiveness from before had all disappeared. Meanwhile, Little Gold Lightning was looking around curiously in Han Jin's room. It had never been here before and was curious about everything. Surprisingly, it walked normally, which was a sharp contrast to the limping from before. "Master, are you chanting a spell?" Harley did not understand the language of the other world. Let's put it simply, Han Jin smiled. When a poet meets a soldier, he can't reason with him. Do you know what this means? When a poet meets a soldier. Harley nodded as if he understood. I understand. Shazoz's reputation has always been very good. In fact, Dragon City had sent a giant dragon to contact Nicholas a long time ago. But in the end, Nicholas chose Dragon City. This was inseparable from Shazoz's hard work. Hanjin said softly, he is very upright and sincere. He can understand the difficulties of the lower races and knows what's important. Although he is as proud as the other dragons, he can control his pride. Unless it's necessary, he rarely uses forceful means. Hale listened attentively. As for how much he understood, only he himself knew. Let me give you another example, then you will understand. Hanjin said slowly, after Shazoz and Nicholas reached an alliance, they left Iron Fist City and another guardian of Dragon City, Harriet, took over his task. However, after only half a year, the conflict between Nicholas and Harriet became very intense. It was to the point that they were about to tear into each other. Why? Because one of Nicholas' grand mages made the demon annihilation crossbow. Harriet believed that the crossbow would pose a serious threat to the dragons, so she asked Nicola to immediately destroy all the crossbows and execute Zhenglin in public. Zhenglin is the grand magus who created the demon annihilation crossbow. Hanjin continued. Nikolai refused, and Harriet ordered the dragons to attack Nikolai's army, trying to destroy the demon annihilation crossbows with her own power. However, Shazoz, who heard the news, returned to Iron Fist City as fast as he could and took Harriet back. I don't know what happened after that, but the result was Nikolai gave in and destroyed the drawings and all the experimental data of the demon annihilation crossbows. He also destroyed more than half of the demon annihilation crossbows that had been made and equipped, leaving only a few for emergencies. The most important thing was that Nikolai handed Grand Magician Zhenglin over to the Dragon Realm and let the Dragon Realm judge. He did not interfere. You betrayed your subordinates just like that? He's such a jerk. Harley shouted. He knew that Hanjin had always regarded Nicholas as an opponent. Of course, he would take the opportunity to scold Nicholas. If it was Harriet, she would definitely not be able to do it. Hanjin smiled and said, to make Nikolai give in step by step, Shazoz had to make sacrifices. This is a compromise. Harley said, yes, but you should not underestimate compromise. Hanjin paused and said, compromise is a kind of adaptable jungle wisdom. Only by compromising can a win-win situation be achieved, or even a multi-win situation. Otherwise, it is very likely that both sides will suffer losses. Because compromising can eliminate conflicts, refusing to compromise is inevitably the prelude to a confrontation. In my opinion, Shazoz is much smarter than Harriet. The latter only knows how to be tough to the end, while Shazoz knows when to compromise and how to choose. Master, I don't understand. Haha. In the eyes of some people, compromising seems to be a sign of weakness and lack of determination. It seems that only by not compromising can one show the true colors of a hero. Don't you think this way of thinking is too crude? In fact, only when people believe that the relationship between people is always the conqueror and the conquered will they not compromise. Without this premise, is it really necessary to fight to the death? Master, if that Shazoz is really as smart as you say, then aren't we in big trouble? Harley shouted. Trouble? Hanjin smiled and said, not really. Then how are you going to deal with him? Harley saw Hanjin's nonchalant expression and became curious. I am very young, and this is my advantage. So, I can lose my temper, do wrong things, and say wrong things, but he can't. Hanjin said lightly. He has to find ways to coax me and induce me. Even if I really make him angry, he can only swallow his bitterness because he is an elder, an adult, and I am just a child. He has to be gentlemanly. How can he lower himself to my level? Then, if you really push him to the point where he can't tolerate it anymore, what should we do? No, you just mentioned Grand Duke Solomon. Didn't I come down? Hanjin smiled and said, I will always let him see hope. I understand. You're giving him a stick and then giving him a sweet date. You've said this before. Harley laughed strangely. Actually, what I said can be explained in one sentence. A gentleman can be deceived. Han Jin paused and said, "You don't understand, do you? I told you a few times to use some time to study the ancient runes. Did you do it? Idiot." "Master, it's not that I don't want to do it, but those runes are too profound." Harley shouted. At this moment, the door was suddenly pushed open. Yelena rushed in and screamed. "How is little Harley? Where are you hurt?" Before she finished speaking, Leslie and Lorraine also came in from outside. Little Gold Bolt was shocked at first, then felt its claws become numb again. It looked at Han Jin with a wronged expression and fell to the floor with a plop. "Ah!" Yelena rushed to Little Gold Bolt's side and bent down to gently stroke it. She remembered that when Morrisons wanted to stomp this little guy to death, Yelena immediately went berserk and almost released magic to attack Morrisons. Now that they had a whole year of feelings for each other, Yelena's heart ached even more. Tears welled up in her eyes. For Little Gold Bolt, this position was very uncomfortable, but it didn't dare to get up. It could only let out a low cry in an attempt to gain Han Jin's sympathy. Han Jin didn't do anything, but Yelena couldn't stand it anymore. She stood up abruptly, her right hand holding her golden melon hammer. She said angrily, "Who did this? Was it that guy outside?" "Forget it, Yelena," Han Jin said softly. "Raphael." Yelena couldn't help but bite her lips. Although she had the power to destroy heaven and earth, her personality was still very weak. At least in front of Han Jin, she was weak. She couldn't accept that Little Gold Bolt was hurt like this, but Han Jin had already spoken. She didn't want to make things difficult for Han Jin, so she was in a dilemma. Of course, he had to put on a show. Han Jin formed a spell, and a white light hit Little Gold Bolt. Little Gold Bolt realized that the numb feeling had disappeared, and it jumped up from the ground with a plop. Han Jin was a little helpless. Fortunately, everyone here was on his side, and their observation skills weren't very outstanding. If it had been those old and cunning guys outside, they would have immediately discovered the flaw. "Little Gold Bolt, are you okay?" Yelena was surprised and happy. Little Gold Bolt screamed and wobbled to Yelena's side. After all, the wisdom of a magical beast was limited. It felt that Han Jin had been intentionally or unintentionally bullying it today, so it was a little scared and wanted to hide further away. Asterisk, 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 the conversation between Shazos and Shazos was full of goodwill. Shazos wasn't looking for trouble and had appropriately expressed his humble attitude. Shazos also didn't want to make enemies for himself. As for Shazos' tough opening speech, he could understand. If Shazos came to the ship with a smile and said that he was the guardian of the dragon realm, it would be too childish. If others didn't believe him, would he have to prove it with a token? First, show your strength, then express your goodwill. Step by step, get to know each other better. This was a very normal method. Shazos chatted with Guevara while paying attention to the people on the God of War, including Domini, who was sitting quietly on the side. Compared to Guevara and Majordomo Gale, he paid more attention to this taciturn Thunder Titan. Guevara and Majordomo Gale's strength had already reached their peak, and they were old, so they couldn't continue to grow stronger. However, Domini was different. If Han Jin could really create his own territory on this continent, Domini would be an indispensable and powerful help. Sass, Leger, and the others had also returned. Before Guevara could introduce them, Harley floated down the stairs and called Sisu and the others over. After that, he didn't come out again. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, it was noon. Han Jin, Yelena, and the others slowly walked out from below, with little gold lightning following behind them. Yelena didn't hide her hostility at all. She even deliberately snorted coldly and took the lead to sit in a seat further away, as if she hated to be near this uninvited guest. Whether Yelena was shrewd or not, there was no need to discuss this question. Shazos could tell at a glance whether the hostility was sincere or not. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. "Raphael, is little gold lightning okay?" Guevara saw Shazos' awkwardness and asked with a smile. Fortunately, Raphael was there. "He didn't die," Yelena said angrily. This time, even Guevara felt a little awkward. He spread out his hands and decided not to provoke Yelena. That is... Shazos lowered his voice and asked Guevara. Raphael's fiancée, Miss Yelena, Guevara replied in a low voice. Understood. Shazos coughed and said, Sir Raphael, before I came here, I heard from Duke Solomon that your weapon was destroyed in the battle with Maxwell. Is that right? Yes, Han Jean replied indifferently. Looks like I came at the right time. Shazos smiled. He turned his wrist, and a glass bottle that was more than a foot tall appeared in his hand. The bottle was filled with something that looked like fine sand. Under the sunlight, the fine sand emitted countless rays of light, like a vast sea of stars. Guevara couldn't help but hold his breath as he stared at the glass bottle. He had seen a lot of things, and, from the various characteristics, the fine sand in the bottle was very similar to something. However, he didn't dare to think in that direction. It was probably just similar. It was impossible. Major Domo Gale's mouth was slightly open. Although he was able to control his emotions well, he shouldn't have a long beard. The slightly trembling tip of his beard had already given his secret away. Yelena glanced at Shazos and turned around. Then her eyes suddenly widened, and she immediately turned back to look at the glass bottle in a daze. This is... Guevara couldn't help but ask. Stellar gold. Shazos smiled very gently, but his heart was throbbing with pain. Before he came, he had prepared several plans. He didn't expect that his opening statement would annoy Han Jean and Yelena. For future cooperation, he had to pay a big price. If you want to use this stellar gold to forge a weapon, it might not be enough, but for everyone, it shouldn't be difficult to collect some meteoric iron. Mixing meteoric iron and stellar gold together won't affect the result. Stellar gold. Han Jean suddenly raised his eyebrows. Because he had learned too much from Solomon, he was far from being able to completely master it. Therefore, he was the slowest to react, but he knew what stellar gold was. Morrison's, come out and see what that is. Sasu shouted. Morrison's was the last one to leave. After Leslie and Lorraine walked onto the deck, he slowly followed them out. Following the direction of Sasu's hand, he asked hesitantly, Sand? You? Sasu was a little angry. Sand? Who would put sand in a glass bottle seriously and take it out like it was a treasure? Ahem. Ahem. Guevara coughed a few times. Sasu and Leger reacted at the same time. Guevara wouldn't come here to curry favor for no reason. The more precious the gift he took out, the more complicated his purpose was. Could they accept it? Also, the more excited they were, the more it meant that they had fully realized the value of stellar gold, which would be disadvantageous for them in the future. Sasu tried his best to control the muscles on his face and calm himself down. He had no time to deal with Morrison's. Is it sand? Morrison's was not sure, so he continued to ask. Han Jean stood up and walked over slowly. His eyes were fixed on the glass bottle. Yelena also stood up hurriedly and followed behind Han Jean. Shazos smiled and handed the glass bottle over. He said softly, Master Raphael, this bottle is very heavy. Please be careful. Han Jean reached out and took the glass bottle. Sure enough, the bottle was much heavier than he had expected. It was about 600 or 700 pounds. If it wasn't for his powerful strength, he would have embarrassed himself in front of everyone. Is this really stellar gold? Yelena's voice trembled slightly. She wasn't a money grubber. When they went to the capital of elements, Han Jean was focused on Solomon's treasure trove of knowledge and had no time to care about anything else. Yelena also had her own secrets. She didn't find a suitable weapon for Han Jean, and this had become one of her regrets. Now that she saw stellar gold, she couldn't help but be excited. I don't think I need to answer this question, right? Shazot sighed. Although it was painful, he was very satisfied with Han Jean and Yelena's loss of composure. There was no loss without gain. In order to become the winner of the fated war and completely defeat Dragon City, what couldn't be sacrificed? Star Gold. Moxink bellowed when he realized what was going on. Keep your voice down, Leja said unhappily. But that's, don't talk. Sasu interrupted. Morrison's was angry. Lorraine, who was in front of him, turned her head and shook her head slightly at Morrison's. Morrison's then realized something, scratched his head, and stopped talking. If this is a gift from you. Han Jean hesitated for a moment and put the glass bottle on the table. It's too expensive. I can't accept it. The huge weight of the glass bottle made the table creak. The god of war was refined by Han Jin himself, but the table wasn't. After a while, it might be crushed. Shazos took the glass bottle and handed it to Han Jin again. There's no need to be polite. Although stellar gold is precious, it's useless to us dragons. Yelena didn't say a word. Although her eyes were full of eagerness, she controlled herself because Han Jin hadn't made a decision yet. Han Jin was still hesitating. Haha, you don't have to hesitate anymore. Shazo smiled. In fact, compared to our future, this is nothing. Han Jin sighed. He felt sincere admiration, but not admiration for Shazos in front of him, but for Solomon. All living beings had different natures. Even for the colossal dragon clan, there were huge differences in their personalities. Some were arrogant, some were humble, some were irritable, some were deep, some were brave, and some were timid. The most frightening thing about Solomon was that he had a pair of eyes that could see through everything. He was extremely accurate in judging people. Han Jin had dealt with the dragons before. Most of them had a superior attitude. Solomon told him that if he really wanted to cooperate with the dragons, Shazos was the most suitable choice. Shazos must have played a decisive role in Nicholas' decision to cooperate with the dragon realm. It turned out that Solomon was right. Other than the unhappiness at the beginning, Shazos had been very sincere. He even spoke respectfully to a human. The guardians of the dragon realm were on par with the elders of the dragon city. They were the highest existences in the entire continent. There was no need for him to be so humble. He could let others accept his rudeness and arrogance because he had the power and qualifications. Raphael, accept it, Guevara said softly. Han Jin paused and reached out his hand again. He took the glass bottle and said in a very serious tone, "Thank you. Why are you being so polite?" Shazos laughed. His two long eyebrows seemed to be alive as they trembled nonstop. He felt very happy. Although the young man in front of him had a bad temper, he was reasonable. If they could continue to be friendly, he was confident that he could stop the expansion of the Dragon City on this land. Chapter 376. Raphael. Yelena suddenly raised her head. Han Jin put down the book in his hand and asked softly, "What's wrong?" "I think that Shazos is not bad. No one said he was a bad guy." Han Jin laughed. "But why are you so hostile towards him?" "I'm hostile towards him." Han Jin's expression became serious. If Yelena could see it, then the others could as well. Was his performance that bad? Han Jin coughed softly. "Yelena, how did you see it?" Yelena looked a little distressed. She frowned and thought for a long time. "It's a feeling. Although you are very polite to him, I know that you dislike him very much." "Feeling?" Han Jin didn't know what to say. He didn't expect a woman's intuition to be so sharp. Of course, this was also because Yelena had devoted all her heart to Han Jin, so it was very likely that she could sense the change in his mood. "Raphael, why?" Yelena asked seriously. "No." Han Jin shook his head. "It's just that he came from the dragon realm and is the representative of the dragon clan, so I just kept my guard up. I didn't feel any hostility towards him. Otherwise, why would I let him go today? But he gave you so much star gold. Do you think I'm like you, bought over by a small gift?" Han Jin smiled and pinched Yelena's nose. "No." Yelena shook her head coquettishly. Once again, Han Jin picked up his own book and began to read it quietly. It was a book about psychic power that Solomon had given him. Many of the books contained Solomon's own insights and experiences, which had a great impact on Han Jin. In the past, when he practiced Taoism, he only knew how to practice it, but not why. Now he had learned to think. Yelena laid on Han Jin's chest and looked up at Han Jin silently. After a while, she couldn't help but ask, "Raphael, can you promise me something?" "What is it?" "When you find a suitable dwarven craftsman and enough meteoric iron, you must let me be there when you want to make a magic item." "Sure, it's a deal." Yelena stretched out her hand. "It's a deal." Han Jin smiled and patted Yelena's hand. "Meteorite iron. There are more than 20 weapon shops in the Holy Crown City. You should be able to find a lot of it, but it's not easy to find a suitable dwarven craftsman." Yelena frowned and thought for Hanjin. Why are you looking for dwarven craftsmen? Get them to create props. There's no need for that. Hanjin pointed at his nose. I'm the best blacksmith. Stop lying. Then why did you need the dwarves to forge items for you before? That was in the past. Besides, Stardust Gold is a little special. Letting the dwarves make it is purely a waste of materials. If the dwarves heard what you said, they would come to your door and fight you to the death. Yelena giggled. There are plenty of people who want to fight me to the death. Hanjin sighed. No matter who they are, as long as they dare to come, I welcome them. At this moment, someone knocked on the door, followed by Guevara's voice. Raphael, are you inside? Yelena was shocked. She quickly jumped up from the bed, put on her little boots, walked to the table, and tidied her hair in front of the mirror. She let out a sigh of relief and signaled to Hanjin with her eyes that it was time for Guevara to come in. Come in, Hanjin said softly. Guevara walked in and saw Yelena in the room. He couldn't help but smile. Sorry to disturb you. You rarely come here to see me. What happened? Hanjin sat up and asked with a smile. You still have the nerve to ask me? Guevara said angrily. Tomorrow is Stillberg and Miriam's wedding day. Don't you care about anything? You came here to read books. I've never planned a wedding for anyone. I don't know anything about it. I don't either. Guevara glared at Hanjin. Forget it. It's useless to talk to you about this. But you should be the one making decisions about the guests, right? Who should be invited and who shouldn't be invited? Give me a list early so that I can send out the invitations. Guests? Who do you want to invite? Hanjin was stunned. A lot. For example, the generals under Lang Ning and the nobles in Holy Crown City. Is there a need to be so extravagant? I don't care. Stillberg is your man. If you don't want to be extravagant, we won't be extravagant. Even if you don't even prepare a wedding room for Stillberg, I have no objections. Guevara shrugged his shoulders. Anyway, we have enough manpower and can change the plan at any time. Actually, I also feel that extravagance is not good. I'm afraid that the kid will become arrogant because of the favor, which will be detrimental to his future. My opinion is it's enough for us to have some fun with our own people. Don't invite outsiders. Hanjin was not afraid of spending money. He liked peace and quiet, and Stillberg's identity was only his servant. It would not be good for the occasion to be too grand. Moreover, Hanjin had decided to hold the wedding on the God of War. He felt uncomfortable letting so many unrelated people set foot here. The God of War was his ritual implement, not a market. Understood. Guevara nodded. All right, there's one more thing. Schumann is here. He asked me to tell you that the organization of the Purple Flower has sent someone to pick you up. Hanjin frowned and did not speak. Raphael, tell me honestly, what's going on with the Purple Flower? Guevara asked. If it wasn't for my urgent question and my bad attitude, Schumann probably wouldn't have said anything. He even wants to hide it from me? Hanjin laughed. Raphael, Mr. Guevara, you two talk first. I have something to discuss with Leslie and Lorraine. Yelena stood up knowingly. Yelena, don't go. It's time for you to know these things. Hanjin said softly. However, when you walk out of this room, don't tell anyone, including the people you trust the most. Understand? I know, Raphael. Don't worry, Yelena said with surprise and joy. The Purple Flower Organization was created by the Abyss Demon Donald, Hanjin said slowly. Donald? Guevara was shocked. How does it have anything to do with him? It is said that Donald was born in the Purple Flower of Hell and has always been fond of them. That's why he named the organization Purple Flower. It has been around for a long time. They have controlled many humans, beasts, and even elves, and are active on the surface. Hanjin pondered. The reason why you don't know about their existence is because they rarely take action. Their mission is to record everything they see and hear. They only record it and never interfere with the direction of the various forces. They never threaten or harm people, so people naturally can't detect them. They also control the elves? How can the elves be controlled by them? Yelena asked in surprise. Whether it's humans or elves, there will always be people who are dissatisfied. They are dissatisfied with their companions, their rulers, or the ideals imposed on them by others. They are dissatisfied with the current situation of the continent. This gave the purple flower an opportunity. Han Jin said, "Actually, the mission of the purple flower is very similar to another organization, the Dark Knight, Aurora." "What is the Dark Knight, Aurora?" Guevara asked. "You shouldn't be asking me this question." Han Jin smiled. "Then who should I ask?" "Of course it's Majordomo Gale. Don't forget, his nickname is the Left Hand of Darkness." Han Jin said softly. "This nickname has two meanings. He is the leader of the Dark Knight, Aurora." "You can say that." Han Jin nodded. That old man actually kept his mouth shut. Guevara's eyes flashed coldly, and then he smiled. He could understand. If everyone would tell their secrets to their trusted friends, then there would be no real secrets in the world. But Majordomo Gale probably won't care about the Dark Knight, Aurora, anymore, but they will still keep in touch. Majordomo won't care? Then who will care? Of course it will be the right hand. Majordomo Gale, is the left hand, and now there's a right hand. Shouldn't there be eyes, heart, and brain? I don't know. Han Jin looked at Guevara's suspicious eyes and smiled. I really don't know. Okay. Guevara sighed softly. Then let's change the topic. Looking at your expression just now, you seem to be in a difficult position. Yes. Han Jin paused. The Purple Flower Organization is Donald's claws on the ground. I really want to destroy them all, but the consequences are unpredictable. I'm worried. What are you worried about? Guevara said slowly, yes, Donald is indeed very powerful, but this is our territory. It is not Donald's place to abuse his power. You don't know how critical the situation is now. Han Jin smiled bitterly. Critical? Let's give an example. For example, we also have an organization comparable to the Dark Knight Aurora. Will we send them to the southwest to gather information on Nicholas? Maybe we can send a small number of them, but we will definitely not focus on the southwest. Why? Because there are still many enemies nearby. Because Guevara's face suddenly changed. Because Nicholas is too far away from us. In a short period of time, it is impossible for us to have a conflict with him, right? Han Jin said slowly, but why would Donald plant his purple flower on our continent? They are even further away from us. Guevara took a deep breath. He could not answer because the secret behind this was too terrifying. In fact, Donald had already prepared for a full-scale invasion. He helped Zagund to test the waters. Han Jin's eyes kept flashing. In the end, what did Donald see? He gave Zagund a third-rate army. But Zagund relied on this third-rate army to expand his own territory and beat the Holy Crown City and Wild Willow City until they could not breathe. Guevara clenched his fists and then slowly loosened them. We can't hide it at all. Even a fool can see that the continent has become weak because of the years of war. Han Jin said word by word. In 3 to 5 years, or at most 20 years, Donald's army will definitely appear on the surface. The Second Continental War will definitely break out. This is not my judgment, but Grand Duke Solomon's. Guevara felt like he was struck by lightning and murmured, Continental War. When the last Continental War broke out, almost all the races on the surface were destroyed. Even the arrogant dragon race suffered heavy losses. Fortunately, for heroes appeared in the end. Under the leadership of the god of war Abraham, the elf messenger Doreen, the mountain king Danton, and the saint knight Gotha, the races on the surface turned the tide and drove the abyss race back to the underground. What do the races on the surface have now? Years of war. People had no way to make a living, various resources were seriously wasted, and there was an irreconcilable hatred between them. How could they fight against the abyss race in such a situation? The main reason why Donald can maintain an observing attitude is that he is very satisfied with the current situation on the continent. The longer the chaos continues, the weaker the resistance will be. Han Jin said in a low voice, but he won't always remain silent. After observing for so long, there will be a day when he can't hold back and raise his butcher's knife. You just said, you don't dare to touch Donald's purple garden flower? What do they have to do with this? Guevara asked. If we touch the purple garden flower, it will undoubtedly tell Donald that we have discovered his intentions and have begun to eliminate his minions. If we are discovered, What's the point of continuing to be a spectator? Han Jin said slowly. Donald is very likely to start the war in advance, but I am not ready, and neither is Grand Duke Solomon. Does Grand Duke Solomon know about Donald's purple garden flower? I don't know, Han Jin replied, but I've already written a letter to Grand Duke Solomon and asked Major Domo Gale to send it back. Guevara walked around in the room with his hands behind his back. His face was very serious. He came today to ask who he should invite to the wedding tomorrow, but he did not expect to find out such a shocking secret. He also could not understand why Han Jin would bury such an important matter in his heart and not reveal anything. If he had not been curious and forced the existence of the purple garden flower out of Shumon, perhaps Han Jin would still not tell him. After a long while, Guevara suddenly said, "In battle, soldiers will inevitably be injured. If they do not receive timely treatment from the priests, their wounds will very likely fester and even rot. The only way to save their lives is to dig out the rotten muscles as early as possible. Some soldiers are afraid of pain and only bandage their wounds, hoping that the rotten muscles will return to normal. Ha! Do you know? This is purely a fantasy. In the end, they will pay a heavy price." Han Jin did not speak. He knew that Guevara's words had a deeper meaning. Donald's purple garden flower is just a piece of rotten muscle to us. Guevara suddenly stopped and turned his gaze to Han Jin. "Raphael, let me ask you, if Donald's army has already appeared on the surface, will the purple garden flower be a big threat to us?" "Very big." Han Jin nodded. "They understand us and can continuously send information about us to Donald. They will even secretly sabotage us. Let me ask you again, will Donald's army appear on the surface?" "Yes, it is only a matter of time. So, whether we touch the purple garden flower or not, we will not be able to change Donald's decision." Guevara sneered. "Yes, then why are you hesitating?" Guevara said slowly. "Do you want to be like those cowardly fools and wait for the rotten muscles to grow back by themselves?" "I know what you said, but time. Guevara sighed softly. "We now have a formidable enemy in the form of the orcs. Once we eliminate the orcs, there's still Chasam from Depew City and Cold Shadow City. What you're saying is, once we eliminate these opponents, we'll have nothing to worry about, and then we can fight Donald with all our might. You're hoping that Donald will attack after we're free, but you don't want to anger him now?" Han Jin raised his eyebrows. He suddenly realized where he had made a mistake. He was thinking too much. If Donald's target is the entire continent, then the purple garden flower's range of activities must be very wide. You just said that the members of this organization are not only humans, but also elves and orcs. Can I think of it this way? In other areas, such as the Southwest District, there are also members of the purple garden flower active. It's just that we were lucky and found them in time. Guevara said softly, "Didn't you notice? The situation on the continent is changing. Nicholas has almost unified the Southwest. His actions are a signal. Perhaps it won't be long before the continent changes from chaos to a situation where several grand duchies rule over each other. This is not what Donald wants to see." Han Jin smiled bitterly. He understood what Guevara meant. "All right, let's say Donald doesn't care about Nicholas." Guevara said, "Do you really think Donald will give you enough time to eliminate your opponents and grow stronger?" "I know what to do," Han Jin said softly. Han Jin didn't want to touch the purple garden flower. It wasn't because he was weak. When he used a playful tone to evaluate the guardian of the Dragon City, Shazos, he didn't realize that he was another Shazos. Shazos was far-sighted. Based on various considerations, he didn't want to have a conflict with Han Jin, so he chose to retreat. Han Jin was the same. He didn't want to face the army of the Abyss race when they were surrounded by enemies. So, he also chose to retreat. Guevara, on the other hand, was quite different from them. He had been through hundreds of battles and had developed a tenacious and tough personality. He had also experienced a life and death experience in prison, which had allowed him to see through everything. The amount of information he had was far less than Han Jin, but he could see things more clearly than Han Jin. "Since February, I've been working hard on writing. My update schedule is unstable because I really can't save up enough chapters. 5,000 words a day usually takes me 7 to 10 hours. A friend suggested that I write a little more every day and slowly save up. But after I finish my daily tasks, I just want to get away from the computer. I can't sit down at all, but I've sat enough. To me, if I want to increase my writing speed, there is only one way, and that is to reduce the quality. I can't have the best of both worlds. I don't have the strength to write. Anyway, I will try my best to reach my limit. I will try my best to not let down my friends who spend money on reading. This is my greatest ability. The double monthly tickets have begun. I hope everyone can help. If you have the monthly tickets, don't keep them. Give me some encouragement and motivation. Chapter 377. Guevara strode down the stairs, followed by Hanjin and Yelena. When he saw Majordomo Gale and Shozo chatting, Guevara suddenly remembered what Hanjin had just said. He couldn't help but glare at Majordomo Gale. Majordomo Gale was bewildered. He was fine when he went down, but why did his expression change so suddenly? Shazoza's gaze fell on Hanjin. Negotiations were a long process. Unless both sides were unequal in status, it was impossible to reach a conclusion in a short period of time. After witnessing Hanjin's irritation, Shazos no longer fantasized about using force. That would only make the situation worse. He wanted to indirectly remind Hanjin of the threat from Dragon City and let Hanjin take the initiative to contact him. Who knew that Hanjin didn't take Dragon City seriously at all? This made him anxious and surprised. Where did this young man's confidence come from? Sir, Shumon hurried to greet him. How many of them are here? Hanjin asked calmly. 2. Only 2. Yes, Shumon replied. But judging from their behavior, their status should be very high. Let's go and have a look, Hanjin said as he walked to the side of the ship. Raphael. Yelena looked at Hanjin with hopeful eyes. She wanted to go out with Hanjin. If she didn't have any special experience, it would be difficult for a young heart to bear such a huge burden. After hearing Hanjin's words, Yelena's eyebrows were filled with heaviness. She was even a little afraid that disaster would come. You should stay here. Some things are not convenient for you. Hanjin smiled. Okay. Yelena lowered her eyes and said in a low voice, then come back soon. I know. Hanjin looked at Yelena deeply. He didn't know whether his choice was right or wrong, but he had to do it. In the details of life, he could accommodate and take care of Yelena, but in other aspects, he hoped that Yelena could become more mature. Cultivation was a path of struggle, a struggle against fate, against heaven and earth. Since Yelena was willing to follow him, she would welcome the baptism of wind and rain. She couldn't be as weak as she was now. The carriage was already waiting below. Hanjin and Shumon got into the carriage. The carriage quickly left the square and rushed straight to the northeast of the Holy Crown City. Shumon seized the time and told him everything he had learned. In terms of secrecy, Donald's UN flower was better than Solomon's Dark Knight Aurora because they didn't need to spy on the information of the lords. They only needed to record what they saw and heard. This kind of work was not dangerous and paid well. In special situations, they could even ask for help from the organization. For example, who fought with whom when the army passed through the city, the morale and equipment of the soldiers who lost in the end, and the living standards of the nobles in the city, the mentality of the ordinary civilians who held the banquet, what the standard was, who got married, how many wives they had, and so on. Of course, there was a lot of invalid, repeated, or false information, but it had nothing to do with them. Without danger, there was no possibility of being exposed. Even if they were caught, no lord would take Donald, who was far away in the abyss, seriously and just laugh at him. Those who were responsible for recording information only belonged to the periphery of the ZUN flower. They had no access to the secrets of the ZUN flower. Once or twice a month, they would put the information they had recorded in a fixed place. Naturally, someone would come to pick it up. Even if they caught 1,000 such people, it would be useless because the ZUN flower could just develop another batch of people to serve them. If someone accidentally obtained valuable information, the ZUN flower would secretly test him. If the result of the test was satisfactory, the person would be promoted. The ZUN flower would set up a special contact line for the person. For example, the concubine of Irma, the former manager of Morgan and Company, was valued by the Zun flower in this way. The information she passed on would be transmitted to the upper management of the Zun flower as soon as possible. Therefore, Irma was killed in the evening right after he met Han Jin in the daytime. The soul that Harley devoured was called Qian Ning. He belonged to the Zun flower's thorns. He was responsible for killing people, including the assassin who killed Irma. However, these assassins only had a single line of communication, so it was impossible to uproot them all. Han Jin also learned a lot from Qian Ning. Apart from the thorns, the Zun flower also had pistils, petals, and filaments. The pistils were mainly female, and their mission was to exchange sex for information. Or they could hide beside someone with a high position. Of course, it would be better if they could obtain information, and they could also remain silent in preparation for the future. The filaments were the chains that transmitted information. The task of the petals was to analyze the information and delete the invalid information. Every city had a stalk that led directly to the flower root. In other words, only by finding the flower root could one catch all the purple garden flowers in one fell swoop. However, only one flower would be destroyed. There would be no connection between the cities. The horse-drawn carriage stopped in front of a small courtyard. Two middle-aged men dressed as servants came up and greeted, "My lord, where's Lord Chipango?" Schumann asked as he opened the carriage door. Lord Chipango went out with him. He went out with him. What about Lord Gibran? Lord Gibran and Lord Chipango went out together. They went out with the people over there? Yes. Schumann turned around and asked, "My lord, what should we do?" "Let's go and take a look," Han Jin said softly. Understood. Schumann nodded. He then turned to the two middle-aged men and said, "Come up and take us there." To deal with an organization like the Zun flower, Schumann couldn't do it alone. So Han Jin called Chipango and Gibran over at the last minute. Although they were still a little weak, Han Jin had no other choice. He had just created his own organization, and he only had so many people. Actually, Harley was more suitable for this kind of thing, but Han Jin didn't feel at ease. With Harley's personality, he might not be able to accomplish anything, but he would definitely ruin things. Besides, Harley was more willing to be a hero who shone brightly. He didn't want to do something sneaky, even if it didn't match his status. After about half an hour, the two middle-aged men finally saw Gibran and Chipango's backs. The coachman whipped the carriage, and it rushed to Gibran and Chipango's side and stopped with a squeak. Gibran and Chipango were a little surprised, but then they saw Han Jin. They didn't waste any time and hurriedly got into the carriage. Chipango smiled bitterly and said, "My lord, why are you here? And with so many people, those two guys are very vigilant. They will definitely notice." "It doesn't matter," Han Jin said lightly. "Which two are they?" "My lord, you want to—" Chipango didn't understand Han Jin's meaning. Han Jin tapped his foot on the ground, and the door of the car swung open. Then he jumped on a street. Gibran hurriedly said, "Raphael, this will alert the enemy." "It doesn't matter," Han Jin said lightly. His Taoist magic could directly strip the soul, and with Harley's devouring ability, as long as he found them, there would be no secrets. Gibran and Chipango looked at each other and got out of the carriage. Schumann also followed. For the people of the Holy Crown City, Chipango and Gibran were unfamiliar faces, but Schumann had become the chief sheriff. So many people knew him. The pedestrians on both sides stopped and looked at Schumann curiously. Some people were whispering to each other. "It's those two people in front." Chipango pointed forward. Han Jin looked in the direction Chipango was pointing at. It was a man and a woman. They walked very slowly, in order to make themselves look normal. When the people in front of them pointed at them, they also turned around and looked around. However, when they met the eyes of Han Jin and the others, their expressions changed immediately. Then they turned around and walked forward slowly. "It's them?" Schumann was stunned. Schumann was also there when the two people walked into the surveillance nest yesterday. He remembered that it was a middle-aged man with a young woman dressed like a noblewoman. But what he saw just now was an old man with gray hair, with a tattered black cloak on his head. Even his clothes were dirty, with patches of gray and black. The woman was wearing a flowery dress that had been washed white, without any makeup. She looked like a country girl who had never seen the world. Yesterday, they were husband and wife, and today, they became grandmother and granddaughter? Yes, it's them. Chipango sneered. There are only a few idiots in the yard. One is Madame Mesa, one is a maid, and one is a cook. Including them, there are 5 of them. Who else could it be other than them? You've been watching them? Schumann asked. No, that would have been discovered long ago. But I secretly sprinkled some magic potion in the yard. As long as someone walks out of the yard, the potion will stick to their body when their soles come into contact with the ground. Chipango pointed at his eyes. You can't see it, but I can. Raphael, are we really going to? Gibran was still hesitant. Then he smiled bitterly. Forget it. We've been discovered. With that, Gibran quickly walked forward and caught up with the grandfather and granddaughter. He stood in front of them and said coldly, Wait, my lord. The old man was shocked and couldn't help but take 2 steps back. Hanjin and Chipango also followed. The old man saw that he was blocked from the front and back, and his expression became even more panicked. He stretched out his trembling arms and blocked the woman behind him. The woman tried her best to shrink behind the old man. Her face was full of pitiful panic. A pair of watery eyes glanced at Gibran, then quickly lowered her head like a frightened rabbit. If it were someone else, they might have sympathized, but Gibran and Chipango were mercenaries who'd gone through a bloody life. They wouldn't be moved easily. Hanjin was even worse. No matter how good their acting was, it was useless. Come with us. Cooperate. Don't ask for trouble, Gibran said coldly. Grandpa, I'm scared. I'm scared. The woman cried softly. Although she didn't blame them, her pitiful expression was clearly accusing them of being bad people. My lord, what are you doing? The old man hugged the woman tightly in his arms and shouted, I only have one granddaughter. I beg you. The pedestrians surrounded them and pointed at them. The 2 people didn't move Hanjin, but they moved the ignorant pedestrians. Because of Schumann's status, no one dared to interfere. It seems that you don't want to cooperate? Gibran sneered. My lord, I beg you, let us go. The old man trembled even more. His eyes were full of pleading as he looked around. No one knew if he was looking for a way to escape or if he was hoping to find a hero to help them. In the distance, the paladin knight Aud appeared with a group of light knights. This was purely a coincidence. He saw Hanjin from afar and hurried over with the light knight. He first ordered the Knight of Light to disperse the onlookers. Then he jumped off his horse and whispered, My lord, what's going on? Oh my God, honorable paladin knight, save us, save us. The old man screamed and threw himself at Aud with open arms. Heh. Chipango revealed a sinister smile and pulled out his dagger. He pounced forward and stabbed the old man's ribs diagonally. With a clang, Aud also pulled out his long sword and hit Chipango's dagger. Although he didn't release his fighting aura for fear of accidentally injuring Chipango, Chipango never thought that Aud would attack him. He was so focused on defending against the old man's counterattack that he was caught off guard. Half his arm was numb, and he staggered back 5 or 6 steps before he could stand firm. Although he wasn't injured, he was embarrassed in front of Hanjin. His face was red with anger, and he glared at Aud fiercely. Grandpa! The woman cried as she rushed over and stood beside Aud with the old man. At the same time, Hanjin waved his hand. Gibran took a deep breath and reluctantly put away his dagger. However, he also looked at Aud with hostility. My lord, what's going on? Aud asked in a low voice. This is the second time. Hanjin's tone was indifferent. Aud was stunned for a moment, but he immediately reacted. Counting the incident in the cemetery, this was indeed the second time. His expression was somewhat hesitant, but in the end he slowly said, Sir, I don't know how they angered you, but you should at least have an explanation, right? Explain to who? To you? Hanjin smiled. Aud couldn't help but hold his breath. He didn't dare to accept this sentence. It was too heavy. Gibran and Chipango couldn't help but laugh. This was their city, and the Holy See was just a guest. What right did they have to criticize them? Although Jedis was a good person and had won everyone's favor, this was 2 different things. They couldn't give in again and again just because of Jedis. Han Jin took 2 steps forward and said calmly, "Move." "My lord, they're just—" Odd wanted to say that they were just ordinary people, and there was no need to make things difficult for them. But he couldn't continue, because Han Jin slowly pulled back his fist. An indescribable wave of energy spread rapidly in the air, with Han Jin as the center. Gibran and Chipango couldn't help but widen their eyes and stare blankly at Han Jin's back. They had seen Han Jin fight before, but this was different from before. This was the first time they felt energy waves from Han Jin's body. Han Jin released his divine sense without holding back. There was an invisible force that kept shaking and tearing the air. Han Jin didn't move at all. His body was still very clear, but his right fist became blurry. There was nothing there to block it. Odd gasped. He knew what the scene in front of him meant. The materialization of spiritual energy. This was the symbol of a superclass master. Although no one doubted Han Jin's strength, Han Jin had never given proof. Today, Odd finally saw it. "My lord, what are you doing?" Odd was extremely nervous. He released his Do Chi to protect himself. In fact, at this time, what he should have done was to attack Han Jin first and disrupt Han Jin's condensing of spiritual energy. However, the difference in status was obvious. Passively receiving Han Jin's attack was one thing, but actively attacking Han Jin was another. He didn't dare. My lord," Odd shouted, trying to communicate with Han Jin as he slowly retreated. The grandfather and grandson were also shocked and almost shrank behind Odd. Finally, Han Jin could no longer condense his divine sense. He let out a low roar and punched at Odd with his right fist. Strictly speaking, Odd was a good person. He liked to meddle in the affairs of injustice and had an upright character. If it was another time or another world, he wouldn't have hurt someone like Odd. But now he had to do something. All this time, he had hoped that Jeds would lead the church to bow down to him. However, waiting alone was too long. Jeds could only convince a few smart people, but not all of them. Some people were like dogs that were spoiled and arrogant. If they weren't beaten, they wouldn't tuck their annoying tail between their legs. Odd could only suffer in silence. He could have chosen to dodge or use his spear to meet Han Jin's fist. This way, the pressure on his Do Chi would be much less. However, he had to protect the grandfather and grandson behind him. Due to the difference in status, he could only passively receive Han Jin's fist. With a loud bang, the ferocious fist force hit Odor's body and exploded into countless turbulent air currents that rolled in all directions. The surrounding Knights of Light were all pushed to the side, and even Chipango and Gibran had to bend down. Schumann was even worse off. He was directly flipped over and landed on the ground, grimacing in pain. The walls and gate of the house that was directly facing Han Jin were directly smashed into pieces. The fist force continued to surge forward, leaving a deep ditch in the courtyard and a 2-meter-tall hole in the roof of the house, from which came the wailing of ghosts and howling of wolves. Both grandfather and grandson were sent flying like straw, crashing into the house one after another, then rolling to the ground. Odd was smashed directly into the house. The armor on his chest was completely twisted, and he felt dizzy. Just as he was struggling to get up, a foot suddenly stepped on his chest and mercilessly stomped him to the ground. Then he heard a cold voice. "This explanation, are you satisfied with it?" Chapter 378. Under the sluggish gazes of the Knight of Light, Han Jin slowly walked out from inside. But just as he walked past the courtyard, a roar suddenly came from behind him, followed by a dazzling light shooting out from the house. It was Odd. The long sword in his hand pointed forward, the light of his Do Chi already approaching Han Jin's back. No matter what, Odd was still a Saint Knight. After suffering such a humiliating attack, he could no longer control himself. However, his whole body was shrouded in white light, making it impossible for others to see his face clearly. His usually resolute cheeks were now completely distorted, and his eyes had turned blood red. He had forgotten his identity, forgotten his responsibility, and only wanted to kill Han Jin with his sword. Han Jin coldly snorted. His figure suddenly disappeared from where he was, and the next moment, he appeared behind Odd. With a light wave of his left hand, a black silk thread slithered out like a snake, instantly wrapping around Odd's body. At the same time, Hanjin's figure moved forward, punching Odd's back. Although he had lost his main magic weapon, with the help of the immortal binding rope, Earth Meld, and the Earth Shrinking spell, in a one-on-one battle, Hanjin was almost invincible. Odd's strength was originally much weaker, and now that he had lost his cool due to anger, the consequences could be imagined. Odd desperately twisted his body, on one hand trying to break free from the immortal binding rope, on the other trying to avoid Hanjin's fist. Unfortunately, Hanjin had more than one hand. Although Odd dodged quickly and Hanjin's fist brushed past his shoulder, Hanjin followed up with another kick. This time, Odd, who was tightly bound, was powerless. He could only let out a roar and release all of his Do Chi to protect himself. With a bang, Hanjin's foot kicked Odd's lower back, and Odd involuntarily fell forward. Gibran and Chipango turned pale with fright and hurriedly dodged to the side. Odd brushed past them and crashed into the opposite brick wall, forcibly creating a large hole in the wall. What was laughable and tragic was that Odd's upper body landed on the other side of the wall, while his lower body was still outside, desperately kicking his legs, looking like a chicken thief in a predicament. Hanjin once again released the Earth Shrinking spell and appeared beside Odd. He reached out and grabbed Odd's hair, pulling him out like a toy. Odd's face was covered in dirt, and his forehead was also bruised and bleeding, but he did not give up. He continued to struggle while glaring at Hanjin with eyes full of hatred. According to Hanjin's original intention, this was already enough. However, Hanjin suddenly hesitated, as if he had sensed something. Besides, Odd's resistance and his eyes were full of hatred, which aroused his anger. Then, let's continue. Hanjin raised his left hand and punched Odd's chest with his right fist. His fist energy could be described as ferocious and unparalleled. After taking the punch, Odd's body flew into the air like a firework flagship. Then, Hanjin appeared in the air again, intercepting Odd's figure and punching Odd's chest. Odd then smashed down like a cannonball. With a bang, the ground was smashed into a cloud of sand and stones, and Odd's body was deeply embedded in the ground. No matter how strong his Do Chi was, there was still a limit to it. Odd could not withstand the continuous heavy blows. His mouth was wide open, and every time he breathed, blood would seep out from the corner of his mouth, and blood would also flow out from his nostrils. Hanjin floated down like a soft feather and landed beside Odd. He looked at Odd with a mischievous gaze, then raised his right fist and punched Odd's face. Everyone nearby could feel the ground trembling slightly. Then, Hanjin raised his fist and punched Odd's face again. After 2 punches, Odd's head had disappeared. At least, from the perspective of the Knight of Light, they could only see Odd's limbs twitching nonstop. Raphael, with a roar, Guevara rushed out from the crowd. What's wrong? Not only Guevara, but Major Domo Gale, Shazos, Dominique, Kane, Hogan, and the others had all come. They had all sensed the violent fluctuations coming from the city and rushed over to provide support. They saw the scene of Hanjin beating up Odd. Who is that? Major Domo Gale asked anxiously. He recognized the armor Odd was wearing, but he could not recognize who it was. That was why he asked such a question. It's Lord Odd, the Holy Knight. Gibran replied stutteringly. Everyone was dumbfounded. How could Hanjin attack Odd? Why? In fact, it was not only them. Gibran and Chipango, who had been watching from the beginning, also did not understand. What was wrong with Hanjin today? Raphael, what's going on? Guevara asked anxiously. He infuriated me. Hanjin replied indifferently. He coldly looked at Odd's bloody face. In fact, Odd's head did not disappear. Hanjin did not want to kill Odd, but because Odd's head was too deep, no one could see it. After a moment, he turned his gaze to Gibran. Gibran, Chipango, and you, Shumon, come with me. Yelena, you come with me too. After that, Hanjin ignored the stunned Guevara and the others and slowly reached out his hand. The unconscious grandparent and grandchild suddenly began to tremble. Then, Harley's figure appeared in the air, flashed a few times, turned into a dark bead, and flew back to Hanjin. Hanjin caught the soul-devouring bead and walked straight to the other end of the long street. Gibran and Chipango looked at each other and hurriedly followed behind Hanjin. Yelena also stepped out of the crowd, rushed to Hanjin's side, and gently pulled Hanjin's arm. The expression in Shazoz's eyes was very complicated. There was horror and joy. Before coming to the Holy Crown City, of course, he had to do some investigation. The Holy Church, which had suffered a great blow, had turned to Hanjin and was struggling to survive in the Holy Crown City. However, it was undeniable that Hanjin and the Holy Church had reached an alliance. Now, just because he infuriated me, a Saint Knight was beaten to a pulp. This man's cruelty and tyranny were undoubtedly exposed. It was very difficult to deal with such an unreasonable young man, so Shazoz was horrified and worried about his overall plan. What made him happy was that today's murder would definitely cause a rift between Hanjin and the Holy Church. No matter if it was Dragon City or Dragon Field, they didn't want to see the Holy Church grow stronger. A unified religion was very likely to create a unified empire, where all the believers would gather under one banner. And this empire would definitely not be controlled by the dragon race. The united human beings might even turn their spearhead and target the great dragon race. When he first formed an alliance with Nikolay, he tried every means to persuade Nikolay to destroy the Holy Church. It's so difficult. Shazoz sighed in his heart. Dealing with this young man was much more difficult than dealing with Nikolay. At least Nikolay was rational. When Nikolay got something, he would voluntarily give up other things. Shazoz didn't need to waste his breath. But what about this young man? He attacked his allies just because he was angry. In the future, if any dragon in Dragon Field angered Hanjin, they would definitely end up like the Paladin Knight. Thinking about Harriet's violence, Shazoz couldn't help but shiver. He couldn't let Harriet come over. He had a feeling that if he let Harriet and Hanjin stay together for a few days, only one of them would survive. Guevara and the others were still staring blankly at Hanjin's back. Hanjin had always given them a good impression. His smile was always so bright, and he had a calm temperament. He didn't fight for fame or wealth. As a lord, he never put on airs and got along with everyone like friends. The current Hanjin was too abnormal compared to the past. Oh, Major Domo Gale seemed to have woken up from a dream. All right, Hogan is looking for me. I have to go back. I'm looking for you. Hogan pointed at his nose and asked. Well, Major Domo Gale patted his head. I remembered wrongly. It's Hal Lister who is looking for me. After that, he quickly walked to the other end of the street. Come back, Guevara shouted angrily. He wasn't a fool and knew what Major Domo Gale was trying to do. Major Domo Gale waved his hand behind him and disappeared into thin air. This was the advantage of being a thief, and Guevara could only stare at the air. Hee, Master Guevara, Shazoz said slowly. I should also leave. You know, there are some misunderstandings between me and the Holy See. If they see me here, you'll have a bigger headache. Do? Forget it. All of you should go, Guevara said irritably. Odd was beaten up like this, and Hanjin just left like that. Someone had to stay behind to give an explanation. Otherwise, how could the Holy See let this go? The mess in front of him could only be cleaned up by him. At the other end of the street, Yelena gently held onto Hanjin's arm and followed him. Raphael, don't be angry, Yelena said softly. Yelena said softly, that kind of people, just kill them. It's not worth getting angry over them. I know, so I'm going to find Jed's now, Hanjin said calmly. Jed's? Yelena was shocked, but then she clenched her teeth and said resolutely, Okay, I'll go with you. Yelena's promise was not simple. It was full of determination. If it was Sunir, she would definitely ask why. If Hanjin's reason could not convince her, not only would she not go, but she would also find a way to stop Hanjin. However, Yelena did not think so much. Accepting Hanjin meant accepting everything about him. She would fight for the right of Hanjin, and she would also fight for the wrong of Hanjin. Even if Hanjin wanted to find trouble with Jed's, she would still stand by his side. No matter how conflicted her heart was, she would still stand her ground. This kind of feeling was blind, and such a woman was also fragile. Her happiness did not depend on herself, but on what kind of man she chose. If she chose the right one, her life would be beautiful, but if she chose the wrong one, she would most likely be miserable for the rest of her life. What are you going to do with me? Hanjin smiled. Let Jeds preside over our wedding. Yelena was stunned and turned to look at Hanjin. Only then did she realize that there was a faint smile on Hanjin's face. Although he was not very happy, there was no trace of anger. You? Yelena stuttered for a long time, but could not form a complete sentence. Let's go. The smile on Hanjin's face grew wider, and then he held Yelena's hand tightly. The moment before Chazos left, he caught the smile on Hanjin's face. He could not help but grin. Temperamental. This is definitely temperamental. He had just seriously injured an ally, and now he's smiling. This young man is really two. The two middle-aged men hurriedly opened the carriage and moved aside. As Schumann's right-hand men, they certainly recognized Odd. After watching the whole conflict, they did not dare to look at Hanjin. At least, Hanjin's personality was far from what Schumann had described. They all got into the carriage. Schumann hesitated for a moment. Sir, where are we going? To find Madame Melissa. Sir, then we have no clues. Chipango said hurriedly. Harley? Hanjin reached out and flicked the soul-devouring orb. After a moment, Harley's somewhat dull voice sounded. Master, I still need some time. These two guys have experienced too much. So you can find what I want. Yes, master. Good, let's go. Hanjin said lightly. Schumann opened the carriage door and said to the two middle-aged men outside, Take us to Madame Melissa, quickly. Gibran stared at Hanjin. After a while, he smiled bitterly and said, Raphael, what's wrong with you now? There's indeed something wrong with Odd, but it's not to the extent of... Because this is the second time, Hanjin said softly. I'm not talking about that. Gibran shook his head. It's your temper. I'm the same as before. I haven't changed. Hanjin smiled. There's something. I don't dare to tell you. I'm afraid you'll get angry again, Gibran said helplessly. Gibran said in a helpless tone. Of course, he was just saying. Who would be responsible if he delayed the important matter? What is it? Do you remember Fabian? Gibran said. Then he added, He's Schumann's deputy. There's something wrong with him? Hanjin frowned. There's nothing wrong with him, Gibran said. Gibran said, The problem is his wife. Fabian got your attention and was promoted from the prison warden to the adjutant of the public security. Many people are optimistic about his future. Just last week, he married another wife. The problem is his new wife? Yes. Gibran nodded. Yesterday, she came to see Madame Melissa. She stayed from noon until dusk before leaving. Schumann, I'll leave this matter to you, Hanjin said. But you have to inform Fabian in advance so that he doesn't misunderstand. Understood. This topic came to an end, and everyone fell into silence. Gibran and Chipango's eyes were still on Hanjin. There was no other reason. They just couldn't reconcile the fierce Hanjin just now with the person in front of them. After a while, Hanjin felt a little helpless. Why do you keep looking at me? You really don't have anything on your mind? Chipango didn't dare to ask this question. Only Gibran had the right to ask. No, Hanjin answered firmly. In fact, there were too many things on his mind, so many that ordinary people couldn't imagine. The misunderstanding with Sunir, the threat of Dragon City and Dragon City, Solomon's huge plan, the orcs who saw each other as a thorn in their side, Nicholas who was far away on the other side of the continent, the abyss world represented by the restless Donald, the Holy Crown City's Holy See, and the ascetic Adolf who would appear at any time. In addition to these, there was a group of more terrifying and powerful existences. However, he couldn't say anything. Solomon had once said that knowledge was the best weapon to refine the soul, and it was indeed true. After leaving the capital of elements, Hanjin had undergone tremendous changes. Even in the face of so many complicated pressures, he was still able to act as if nothing had happened. If it were someone else, even if they didn't go crazy, they would at least be unable to eat or sleep well. Hanjin wasn't pretending. He had seen countless ups and downs, failures and sorrows. Putting himself in their shoes, he knew that his situation wasn't the worst. For example, God of War Abraham and the other three heroes roared at the last moment when they were on the verge of destruction. They used their fearlessness and tenacity to turn the tide, bringing a glimmer of hope to all the races on the ground. What was the situation he was facing now? If others could do it, so could Han Jin. Therefore, Han Jin really didn't care about the threats, and he didn't have the energy to care about them. He just wanted to do what he should do well, that was all. It's good that you're fine. Gibran sighed. He didn't believe it in his heart, but if Han Jin didn't say anything, he couldn't do anything. Sir, we're here. Someone knocked on the carriage in front. Break in, Schumann said fiercely. He had already caught the mentality of a superior. Wasn't it just using the most direct method to solve all problems? Then he would go straight to the end. Hearing Schumann's order, a middle-aged man jumped off the carriage and released his protective chi. Then he ran a few steps and hit the door first. Then he immediately dodged to the side and let the carriage in. Han Jin jumped out of the carriage first and glanced around. It was a very quiet and secluded courtyard. Under the influence of spring, tender green grass sprouted from the ground and covered the courtyard. Behind the courtyard, there was a small building 7 or 8 meters high. It was divided into 2 floors, and there were about a dozen rooms in total. Han Jin found a woman standing behind a window on the 2nd floor, staring down blankly. Han Jin pinched his fingers and released the shrinking spell. In an instant, he appeared in front of the window. Then he punched out, and the whole window was smashed into pieces. The clear glass shattered into countless pieces and splashed inwards. The woman screamed and couldn't help but sit on the ground. Then she tried to shrink back. Han Jin tiptoed and jumped into the room. Yelena released the levitation spell and rushed in after him. Gibran and Chipango jumped up and jumped into the room with the tips of their feet. Dear sirs, it's the last day. In recent months, I've been very diligent and responsible. In fact, it's inevitable that there will be big and small things in life, but I've never stopped updating. This may sound easy, but it's really hard to do. For example, if there's a headache or fever, or if there's a friend that I have to entertain, no matter what the situation is, I have to write out the mission for that day. I even didn't go to the annual meeting at Chidian. I gave up a good opportunity to go on a free trip because I don't have any chapters. If I lose readers because of my words and stories, then I can't do anything about it. There are always people who like and dislike me. If I lose readers because I stop updating, then it's really a tragedy. I don't want to lose readers because of me. I can pat my chest and say that I've done a lot, really a lot. Now, I hope that I can get everyone's support and help me with the monthly votes. Here, Southwall thanks all of you. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the legal reading. Chapter 379. The woman was greatly frightened. Glass shards scattered all over her body. There was even a half-finger-long, sharp, triangular shard that pierced the corner of her eyebrows. If it had been a little more inwards, she would have definitely become a one-eyed person. However, she was so frightened that she could no longer feel pain. She stared blankly at Han Jin and the others. In the corner of the room, a maid who was cleaning next to a bookshelf was also frightened. She threw away the rag and covered her mouth with both hands. Her body was almost curled up into a ball. Get out. This has nothing to do with you, Han Jin said to the maid indifferently. The maid stood up in a panic and rushed out of the room without looking back. Stop, Han Jin suddenly shouted. The maid was shocked again. She pressed her back against the wall. Her arms and legs were trembling slightly. In fact, she couldn't leave even if she wanted to. Footsteps came from outside the door. As Schumann pushed the door open and walked in, the 2 middle-aged men followed behind him. They were holding a kitchen maid with a bruised nose and swollen face. It was obvious that when they rushed upstairs, they were stopped by the kitchen maid. Schumann didn't hold back at all and directly ordered his subordinates to attack. Schumann, it's you. The woman in the upper-class dress screamed. You know her? Han Jin asked. Of course I know her. She is General Quincy's wife and only wife, Schumann replied with a smile. Quincy. Han Jin felt that the name was very familiar. Quincy's strength is not very good, but he has gained Dismark's trust. He is only ranked behind Gerald. However, I heard that General Quincy mysteriously disappeared during a mission. It seems that he is underground. Huh. Han Jin laughed. He remembered that Quincy was the general he had trapped in the abyss. However, this was a matter of a few years ago. Schumann, what are you doing here? The woman screamed. Don't pretend, Lady Maya of the purple garden flower. Schumann's face turned cold. Come with us. What purple garden flower? The woman asked in bewilderment. Still not giving up? Schumann sneered. Lord Gibran, it's up to you. Just as Gibran took a step forward, Han Jin waved his hand to stop Gibran. However, his gaze turned to the maid. Madam, Mesa doesn't know about the purple garden flower. You should know, right? The maid's eyes widened, and her delicate face was filled with confusion and fear. Tell me, who is the blade wielder? Han Jin asked softly. No matter how perfect the maidservant's performance was, it could not hide from his insight. When ordinary people were afraid of something, they would always do all kinds of meaningless actions. If he shifted his focus elsewhere, using the corner of his eyes or his senses to filter out the fake trembling, he would find that the maidservant's posture was very stable. According to Gibran and the others' analysis, this small building was just a flower stem. If even a flower stem was so powerful, then the power of the entire purple garden flower would have to be re-evaluated. Open! Han Jin shouted angrily. The soul-devouring orb on his left wrist suddenly shot out and flew straight to the back of the maidservant's head. With a puff, the soul-devouring orb sank into the maidservant's hairbun. The maidservant trembled violently, and her screams stopped abruptly. Her body was thrown against the wall, and then she fell down bit by bit. Wisps of smoke drifted out from the back of the maidservant's head and condensed into the shape of Harley. Han Jin sighed softly. Small beads of sweat had already seeped out of his forehead. It seemed that this kind of spell could not be used often, at least not when there was no guarantee that it would work. How is it, Harley? Han Jin asked slowly. What a rich power, huh? Harley laughed strangely. Han Jin waved his hand, and Harley turned into a black orb again and shot towards Han Jin. Putting the soul-devouring orb back on his bracelet, Han Jin swept his gaze over the kitchen maid, whose face was bruised and swollen, and the noblewoman. There was no need to mention the kitchen maid, but the noblewoman was just a woman who did not even have the strength to truss a chicken. The moment the window shattered, Han Jin had been observing the noblewoman's reaction. She did not dodge or evade, letting the glass shards fall on her body. One of the shards pierced her brow bone, almost blinding her. In the face of such danger, most professionals would not be able to control their instincts. Therefore, Han Jin shifted his attention to the maidservant. Let's go, Han Jin said softly. Sir, we're leaving just like that? Schumann asked in surprise. What else do you want to do? At least send someone to control this place to prevent the news from leaking out, Schumann said. Also, the two of them just heard that we are looking for the blade wielder. No, I didn't hear anything. The noblewoman was shocked. She understood the meaning behind Schumann's words. She covered her ears and screamed, as if this could prove that she really did not hear anything. Go find Alexander and have him send a few mountain warriors over, Han Jin said slowly. He deliberately ignored Schumann's words, because there was no need to make things difficult for a poor widow. Moreover, General Quincy had died in his hands. If he killed this poor widow, it would make him feel like he was exterminating her family. He did not want to be so vicious. After saying that, Han Jin jumped out of the broken window. Schumann coldly looked at Madame Mesa, waved his hand, and walked towards the door. The two middle-aged men through the swollen kitchen made to the ground and followed Schumann out. Raphael. Gibran caught up to Han Jin in the courtyard and whispered, Why go through so much trouble? Let's just kill the two of them. What? Han Jin was stunned. According to Gibran's usual personality, he would not be so cruel. Didn't you notice? That Madame Mesa should know who you are. There is hatred hidden in her eyes. Gibran said softly. She seems to already know about General Quincy, but we did not tell anyone. How did she know? There is no such thing as an airtight wall in the world. After a long time, someone will leak it out. Han Jin thought for a moment and smiled. Forget it. If she hates me, then she hates me. What can a widow do? But I have an uneasy feeling in my heart. Gibran said, Oh. Han Jin's footsteps suddenly stopped. If it was someone else, they might not take Gibran's words seriously because this kind of thing was the most unreliable. However, Han Jin was different. As a former private detective, he trusted his intuition very much. Similarly, he would not ignore other people's intuition. The wind blew in through the broken window, making a whistling sound. Madame Mesa sat quietly on the ground, motionless. The cook grimaced and struggled to get up from the ground. When she saw the maid's bloody body, she was so scared that her legs went soft and she sat on the ground again. Get out, Madame Mesa said coldly. The cook did not dare to disobey her master's order, but she really could not get up. Finally, she crawled to the door with her hands and feet. Asterisk, 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 under the light of the setting sun, a well-dressed and graceful old man slowly walked into the Holy Crown City. Although the battle between the elves and the orcs was in full swing, the Holy Crown City was not affected. Because almost all of Forza's strategic plans had not been realized, he did not have the energy to attack the Holy Crown City. Therefore, the security of the Holy Crown City was not very strict. Pedestrians could freely enter and leave, but only limited to humans. The racial characteristics of the elves and orcs could not be concealed. If the two appeared at the gate of the city, they would certainly be treated differently. The old man did not walk fast. While walking, he looked at the scenery on both sides with great interest. However, he did not wander aimlessly. It seemed that he had a certain understanding of the layout of the Holy Crown City. He did not ask anyone for directions. When it was time to go straight, he went straight. When it was time to turn, he did not hesitate. Finally, he stopped in an alley. After looking around, he directly pushed open the door of a courtyard and slowly walked in. There was only one person in the room. He was staring at the wall in a daze. The old man opened the door and walked in. The two people's eyes collided. The owner of the room slowly stood up and said in a neither humble nor arrogant voice, "You are here. Who are you?" The old man's tone was not polite at all. It was full of condescension. "My name is Cortini." The man in the room bowed slightly. "My master asked me to wait for you here." "Your master is Raphael?" "Yes. Let Raphael come see me." The old man waved his hand impatiently. "Your tone is not very friendly," Cortini said lightly. "And I want to make one thing clear. Lord Raphael is the owner of this city, and you're just a guest. If you correct your attitude, it will be good for you and for us." "Friendly." The old man was furious. "In my eyes, you're just a group of little reptiles. What qualifications do you have to ask me?" Following the old man's roar, an invisible pressure spread out in all directions. The windows on both sides of the house were blown open at the same time, and the dust on the roof was shaken to the ground. Catini's face turned pale, but his body was still straight and upright. "If you really can't control yourself, then everything will be simple." Cortini sneered. "The guardian of the dragon field, Chazos, is here. I'm looking forward to the scene of the two of you meeting." The invisible pressure suddenly disappeared without a trace. The old man's face became very ugly. He paused for a moment and said word by word, "Chazos? What is he doing here?" "That's not something I can know." Cortini's eyes showed a hint of mockery. "Are you willing to be quiet?" "Ha! So the most powerful superior dragon on the continent also has a time when he is weak at heart. You." The old man took a deep breath. "Are you deliberately provoking me?" "No, I just want to seek justice," Cortini said coldly. "You just insulted my master, didn't you? I can kill you." The old man glanced at Cortini. "Since Raphael can find me here, He won't refuse to cooperate with me because of you. I don't care. Cortini smiled. He really didn't care. Ever since Hanjin buried Zagun's ashes with his own hands, he knew what to do in the future. This is Lord Raphael's matter. As for me, I just need to do what I have to do. The old man's expression became serious. He stared deeply at Cortini. After a while, he sighed softly. Even someone like you is willing to be loyal to him? Willing to give up everything? I'm really getting more and more curious. I'm just an insignificant servant. After regaining his dignity, Cortini's tone became gentler. He didn't want to fall out with the old man. Of course, if the old man continued to be arrogant and rude, it would be a different matter. Now, are you willing to talk to me? You want to talk to me? The old man's eyebrows immediately rose. Of course not. Cortini smiled. Now the situation in the Holy Crown City is a bit complicated. Master doesn't want to see any accidents. So, before he makes a decision, I'll accompany you for the time being. If you have any questions, just tell me. I'll answer you truthfully as long as I can. He hasn't made a decision yet? The old man was so angry that his beard and hair stood up, but he didn't release any pressure. Then why did he ask me to come here? Because at that time, Shazos, the guardian of the dragon realm, didn't contact Master. Cortini replied softly. The old man closed his mouth, but the muscles on his face twitched slightly at the same time. Cortini's explanation had a deep meaning. Shazos took the initiative to find Hanjin, so the Holy Crown City had many choices. To put it bluntly, the Holy Crown City was not afraid of you. After a long silence, the old man had to lower his posture. His tone became softer than Cortini's. How long has Shazos been here? It seems to be a few days. Cortini replied with a smile. I've been staying in the room and seldom go out, so I don't know. Then, the old man suddenly became hesitant. He wanted to say it, but he didn't want to because the secret was too important. Cortini waited for a long while, but he didn't continue, so he shrugged his shoulders. What do you want to ask? Shazos has already known the whereabouts of the heart of the dragon. The old man finally couldn't bear it. I don't know. Cortini shook his head. You don't know? Then what do you know? The old man was angry. A lot, because I'm involved in a wide range of fields, magic, alchemy, and poetry. What do you want to talk about? Cortini replied softly. You are very good, very good. The old man said in a very stiff tone. If it were another scene, he would not hesitate to crush this person in front of him into a bloody pulp. But now he could only endure it secretly. You flatter me. Cortini smiled. I just said, I'm just an insignificant servant. When will Raphael come to see me? I'll pass on your message to Master, but when he comes, it's up to Master to decide. If Raphael doesn't come for a month, I'll have to wait here for a month? The old man was so angry that he laughed. That's impossible. If he doesn't meet you, how will Master know which decision is rational and appropriate? The smile on Cortini's face grew wider. You can go. The old man slowly closed his eyes. When you see Raphael, don't forget to tell him that my companions are waiting for my news in the forest 200 miles away. If it takes too long, their patience won't be as good as mine. I'll pass on the message to Master. Cortini's expression didn't change. Don't you have anything to say to me? The old man waved his hand. He could see that there was no point in continuing to talk with this person who was neither servile nor overbearing and had a glib tone. Yesterday, a complicated day. After I finished updating, I waited until 9 o'clock and realized that there wasn't much of a difference, only 50 or 60 votes. And that was when they didn't update the 30-day chapter. So I pessimistically thought that there was no chance. So I ran out and waited until 2 o'clock in the morning to come back. When I logged into Qijian to take a closer look, I couldn't believe my eyes. I'm very, very touched. I didn't expect so many friends to support me. Now that I think about it, maybe it's because I'm usually too introverted and rarely speak in a group, so I don't really understand my reader group. I'm just a silly writer who doesn't care about what's going on outside and is only focused on writing my words. This habit isn't good, but it's hard to change. I spend 7 to 9 hours a day writing, and I read information, book reviews, and various books to replenish my nutrition. Adding all these together, I spend at least 10 hours a day sitting in front of the computer. So after I finish my work every day, I let out a long sigh of relief, and then I want to escape from the computer. It's like there are nails under my butt, and I can't sit still anymore. Try to increase my speed. That's the only way. But I've been shouting this sentence for a few years, and the speed hasn't changed. It's very frustrating. In the end, I'm very excited by everyone's support, and I'll continue to work hard. Sadly, I only found out about the classification reward at the beginning of April when I was sleepy and casually glancing at their chat. I finally understand why the brothers who obviously can't enter the top 10 monthly votes keep shouting monthly votes. All right, I'll start shouting too. Everyone, if there's a guaranteed monthly vote, don't be stingy. Every bit of your support will become my motivation. Vote for me. Chapter 380. In the future, we still have a long way to go. Hanjin spoke very slowly, holding Stillberg's and Miriam's hands in each other's. He slowly put their hands together. I hope that the two of you can respect and love each other and never leave each other. All right, I won't say any more, lest someone thinks I'm long-winded. Stillberg's eyes were filled with tears as he stared blankly at Hanjin. He had so many things he wanted to say, but he didn't know where to start. Scenes from the past replayed in front of his eyes. He wanted to cry out loud, but it conflicted with the current atmosphere, so he could only control himself. Miriam, let me say a few last words to you. Hanjin turned his gaze to Miriam and said gently, You know, although Stillberg and I are the same age, I've always seen him as my younger brother. He's a little cowardly. I hope that you can fulfill your responsibilities as a wife. Not only do you have to take good care of him, but you also have to encourage him, and push him to improve himself. Do you understand what I mean? Yes. Miriam nodded vigorously, tears quietly flowing down her cheeks. But unlike Stillberg, she was crying tears of happiness. More than a year ago, she was just a flower girl living at the bottom of the isolated cliff city. Every day felt like a year, and she had to endure hardships. She didn't have any ability to resist fate, and when Cromwell reached out to her, she could only passively endure. In the end, it was Hanjin who saved her, and from then on, her life had turned over a new leaf. There weren't many people who came to the god of war to celebrate the wedding, but it depended on who they were. The Dragon Knight Gavara, the Left Hand of Darkness Majordomo Gale, the Thunder Titan Dominique, the Guardian of the Dragon Realm Shazos, and others such as Lang Ning, Alexander, Halister, Gibran, Kane Chipango, and so on. They were all powerful figures in the Holy Crown City. Miriam knew that she was very ordinary, and it was an honor to receive the sincere blessings of so many important people. Yelena smiled and took out a small red box. She gently opened the lid, and a dazzling aura gushed out. Inside the box was a necklace made of dozens of red gems. These gems were called bloodstones, and they were very precious. But for Yelena's family, they were nothing. However, the dozens of gems were almost exactly the same in color and size, which was very rare. Obviously, the creator of this necklace had put in a lot of effort. Miriam was dazzled, and a look of fear appeared on her face. She couldn't help but look at Hanjin. Although she didn't know what these dozens of identical gems meant, she could feel that Yelena's gift was extremely valuable, and she didn't dare to accept it. Hanjin smiled and nodded. He didn't expect that Yelena had prepared a gift for this day, and even kept it a secret from him like a child. When Yelena took out the necklace, he was also stunned. Look at what he's doing. This is my gift, Yelena said coquettishly. She undid the necklace, and without waiting for Miriam's permission, she personally put it on Miriam's neck. Maybe it was because of the reflection of the necklace, or maybe it was because of something else, but Miriam's face turned red. Thank you. She looked up at Yelena and sighed in her heart. Then, she lowered her voice and said, Thank you, madam, what? Yelena paused, then became overjoyed. She took out a ring in a flurry. Here, this is for Stillberg. Miriam took the ring and carefully put on Stillberg's finger. Then, She put her arm around Stilberg's arm and pinched Stilberg's arm from an inconspicuous angle. Stilberg understood what Miriam meant and said in a low voice, "Thank you, madam." Yelena was so happy that her face was even redder than the bride's. She lowered her head and retreated to Han Jin's side in a panic. "Begin," Hogan shouted, and then gave the order to the magicians. Boom, boom, boom. The magic crystal cannons on both sides of the god of war roared at the same time. Rays of red, light blue, yellow, and white light shot into the sky. From below, it looked like a huge flower was blooming. This was Han Jin's idea. Of course, he would not waste war resources. After a few rounds of firing, he would at most use up a few hundred grade 2 and grade 3 magic crystals. Moreover, the cannons would not have much power after a long distance. The roar of the magic crystal cannons alarmed the residents of Holy Crown City. They all walked onto the streets and looked up at the god of war that had risen into the sky. "I didn't prepare any gifts, huh?" Harley laughed strangely. "But I have something fun." After saying that, Harley's body turned in a half circle. The lower half of the smoke condensed into a black ball about 2 meters in diameter. Miriam could clearly see a familiar figure swimming in the ball. Miriam could not help but cover her mouth. She almost cried out in surprise. "You remember now?" Harley laughed. "He dares to bully our Miriam. Ha! Watch how I punish him." Just as Harley finished speaking, the shadow within the sphere suddenly began to struggle with all its might, knocking itself all over the place. The face that Miriam had seen before also began to distort. "Harley!" Han Jin shouted unhappily. "Don't scare Miriam." He knew that Harley wanted to make Miriam happy, but unfortunately, the methods that an undead creature could come up with were always biased towards the dark side. It did not fit in with the current festive atmosphere. Harley was stunned for a moment, and his body spun in half a circle. The black ball turned back into smoke, and Harley's tone was a little awkward as he stuttered. "Huh? Miriam, I wasn't trying to scare you. I was just trying to, I know." Miriam bit her lips so hard that they almost bled. She barely managed to stop herself from crying. "Thank you, Harley." She did not have any thoughts of blaming Harley. There were so many people trying to make her happy. What was there to be dissatisfied with? After that, Guevara, Majordomo Gale, and the others gave some gifts. Then, it was the turn of the young people like Morrison's and Sassu. When young people encountered something like this, they would definitely harbor evil intentions. They would not rest until they tortured Stilberg to death. The atmosphere became more and more lively. Han Jin quietly left the crowd and went to the back of the ship. He looked at the blue sky and was lost in thought. "Do you feel a little regretful?" A clear voice rang out from behind Han Jin. "Regretful? What regret?" Han Jin smiled. "The wedding should have been hosted by Jed's, but you injured Odd. He can't attend the wedding at this time," Dominique said softly. "I heard from Master Guevara that we sent a total of 6 invitations to the Holy See, but not a single person has come." "Ha! If they don't come, then so be it." Han Jin's expression was indifferent. "You don't regret it?" Dominique asked slowly. "What's done is done. There's no point in talking about it." Han Jin smiled and changed the topic. "By the way, Dominique, as a Thunder Titan, your control of thunder and lightning should be very strong, right? I should be better than your wife." Dominique smiled. "I need your help." "Okay, you're not going to ask. What do I need you to do? I've lived here for a long time." This strange answer made people feel like they were talking nonsense, but Han Jin understood Dominique's mentality. He sighed softly and did not say anything. Han Jin slowly turned his head and looked back. Everyone was having a good time, especially Morrison's. He was holding on to Lang Ning tightly and shouting something. Lang Ning tried to avoid Morrison's, but no matter how hard he tried, he could not break free from Morrison's big hands. He smiled bitterly. "Can you hear what they're saying?" Dominique asked softly. "That guy wants Lang Ning to bring the Abyssal Banshee to the ship." Han Jin was angry and amused at the same time. "It's not easy for them either." "Not easy?" Han Jin was surprised. "When you led the army to attack Black Raven City for the first time, didn't you almost cause trouble?" "You mean the curse of the Abyssal Banshee?" "Yes." Dominique nodded. I heard that many generals and soldiers were cursed at that time. Yes. Fortunately, Zagun did not have time to take away the purifying crystal from Black Raven City. Otherwise, we would have suffered a great loss. Han Jin sighed. I'm too tall, so there's no room suitable for me below. Also, when you built the God of War, you obviously didn't know that you would become friends with a Thunder Titan. For me, the corridor and stairs below are too small, so I can only stay on the deck. Dominique changed the topic. At first, they were a little worried about me, but they gradually got used to it. They even ignore my existence. After so long, I've heard many interesting things. What? Tell me. Han Jin was curious. For example, the Abyssal Banshees. Dominique smiled. They're very interested in the Abyssal Banshees. They? Who are they? Many. Morrisons, Cecil, Leger, Kane, Winston, and so on. Almost all of them. These guys. Han Jin did not know whether to laugh or cry. You can't impose strict requirements on them, Dominique said. They're very young, aren't they? But you have to know that they only talk about it. They have never put it into action. Do you know why? Why? Because they don't want to embarrass you. Dominique paused. If it weren't for your concerns, Han Jin was silent. He knew that Dominique was telling the truth. They know that this peaceful sky is supported by you. Dominique's gaze turned to the horizon. They are also grateful to you. Han Jin quietly looked at Morrison's, Leger, and the others who were messing around in the distance. He did not speak for a long time. Only he knew what he was thinking. But sometimes they feel troubled. Troubled? They have their own pride and ideals, Dominique said softly. But you walked too fast, and they couldn't keep up. You were fighting the enemy outside, and they could only hide in the God of War. They couldn't help you, and they didn't want to cause trouble for you. So other than being obedient children, what else could they do? Dominique said softly. Han Jin was silent for a moment. Dominique, who told you to say this to me? No one. I just wanted to say it. You've changed. Han Jin glanced at Dominique. When we first met, you wouldn't say such things, and you wouldn't think so much. When we first met, Dominique smiled. But you've changed more than me. The biggest change in Han Jin was his contact with Grand Duke Solomon. Dominguez, on the other hand, had her own opportunities. She didn't just listen to the idle chatter of Moxink and the others. Guevara and Majordomo Gale often sat here and talked about the current political situation. Sometimes, Jeds would join in as well. Dominguez listened for a long time and thought about it for a long time. In fact, she had been studying all this time, but because she never revealed her thoughts, no one could tell. I know what to do, Han Jin said slowly. Dominique smiled and did not speak anymore. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk as the night deepened. Several figures silently stood in the endless wilderness. Han Jin, who was the leader, had been looking up at the sky. Yelena was standing beside him, and Majordomo Gale and Dominique were also here. Hogan was observing the surroundings from time to time, and Harley was no longer as carefree as he used to be. Instead, he looked very dignified. Raphael, why does it have to be today? Yelena asked softly. She looked very excited. She asked this question not because she was against anything, but because she was curious. The wedding was just coming to an end, and Stillberg and Miriam were still in the bridal chamber. But Han Jin had already found them and brought them to such a desolate place. She was puzzled. Because there's no moon today, Han Jin replied with a smile. Moon? Is it very important? Very important. Han Jin paused. It's time. Yelena, no matter what you see later, don't act rashly. I know. Yelena nodded heavily. When I make a magic item, it may make a lot of noise and take a long time. Han Jin said slowly. I may completely lose my ability to protect myself. If an enemy hears or sees something and approaches here, I can only rely on you. Yelena didn't expect it to be so serious. She couldn't help but look at Majordomo Gale behind her. Don't worry. Majordomo Gale's tone was still very relaxed, but his expression had become serious. Hogan. Han Jin waved his hand. Hogan ran to the center and took out pieces of meteoric iron of different shapes from a space ring. He carefully placed them on the ground. "You've been preparing here for a long time, right?" Dominique saw that the ground around them was full of strange runes. "Yes," Han Jin answered casually, then began to form a spell. He didn't want so many people to see his expression, but he had no other choice. He was going to use the Thunder Refining spell to refine the stellar gold. This spell was very dangerous, so he was prepared to fail. If he really failed to refine the stellar gold on the God of War, the others would be unlucky as well. If they ran underground and couldn't trigger the Thunder Retribution, they could only choose this desolate place. After a moment, Han Jin's rapidly forming fingertips suddenly stopped. Then he said softly, "Stay away." Yelena and the others hurriedly walked out. They were already more than 30 meters away, but Han Jin was still not satisfied. Farther. It wasn't until Yelena and the others were more than 100 meters away that Han Jin turned his gaze to the meteoric iron in front of him. He gently turned his wrist, and a quietly burning fireball appeared in his palm. Then the fireball slowly expanded. After about 7 or 8 minutes, the fireball had become half the size of a car wheel. Han Jin pushed his hand forward, and the fireball slowly fell on the meteoric iron, continuing to burn quietly. Not long after, this meteoric iron, which was known as the toughest metal on the continent and could give even dwarf forging masters a headache, began to melt little by little, turning into a bright green liquid that flowed down. Just as the molten iron was about to come into contact with the ground, Han Jin stretched out his right hand and flicked it as if he was playing a piano. Every time his fingertips flicked, a bright green bead would fly into the air and float there. The speed of the melting of the meteoric iron became faster and faster, and so did the flicking speed of Han Jin's fingertips. In less than half an hour, all the meteoric iron had turned into molten iron and was wriggling in the air like a living cloud. Han Jin controlled the liquid iron with his telepathic thoughts, and then took out a glass bottle that was more than a foot tall. Inside it was the star gold that Shazos had given him. Han Jin's wrist suddenly turned forward, and an invisible vibration instantly shattered the glass bottle. Countless grains of star gold, like gravel, were thrown forward by Han Jin's gesture and hit the bright green liquid iron. Regardless of whether there was light in the surroundings, the star gold would always release an eternal light, which was the origin of its name. Even if it was wrapped in the bright green molten iron, it could not block the rising and falling golden light spots at all. From afar, the cloud-like bright sand molten iron looked like a piece of the sky, and the golden stars looked like a group of bright stars in the distance. Yelena was stunned and murmured, "So beautiful." Han Jin continued to release the 3 true flames and let the molten iron flow continuously, allowing the star gold to seep into the depths of the molten iron. After an unknown amount of time, he let out a long sigh. Then a thunderous roar resounded between heaven and earth. "Rise!" Around Han Jin, countless talismans lit up in an orderly manner, and then a huge ball of light rose from the ground and shot straight into the sky. The dazzling light illuminated the earth. With a loud bang, the ball of light exploded in the sky. Pieces of faintly discernible clouds condensed at the place where the ball of light exploded. Soon, the clouds became denser and denser, and finally covered the entire sky, forming an incomparably huge whirlpool, and the whirlpool was still spinning slowly. Chapter 381. Major Domo Gale, Domini, and Yelena's expressions all changed. Although they couldn't figure out what was going on with the cloud vortex in the sky, they could clearly feel that a huge destructive force was brewing in the clouds. Han Jin slowly stretched out his hand and pointed straight at the sky. The moment he straightened his arm, the world suddenly became quiet, and the wind in the wilderness also inexplicably disappeared. The clumps of newly grown grass seemed to feel an invisible pressure and fell to the ground one by one. Hogan and Harley were better off, as they had seen Han Jin release this terrible magic with their own eyes. However, Majordomo Gale and the others all had a creepy feeling. The indescribable pressure was even more terrible and powerful than the dragon's might. It could even penetrate into the depths of one's soul. If it weren't for their strong willpower, they might have knelt down on the spot. At this moment, the sky suddenly lit up, and then a dazzling bolt of lightning rushed out of the vortex and fell straight down. Different from ordinary lightning, this bolt of lightning was extremely bright and clear, without even a trace of electric arc. It was like a giant stick that supported the sky, smashing straight down to the ground. Yelena was shocked. She saw that the lightning was falling towards Han Jin's position. Although she didn't understand why Han Jin attacked her with magic, it was too late to ask. She took out her magic staff and tried to cast a magic shield on Han Jin. "Miss Yelena, wait," Hogan hurriedly shouted. He had been paying attention to the movements of the others, because he had made the same mistake before. But Yelena wouldn't listen to Harley at all. Major Domo Gale knew that Hogan would never harm Han Jin, so he grabbed Yelena's arm and said, "Wait." In the middle of the wilderness, Han Jin let out a loud shout and raised his hands. The bright cluster of stars followed Han Jin's gesture and flew straight into the sky, facing the bright bolt of lightning. Han Jin's figure followed closely behind, his hands constantly forming spells. The lightning and the star cluster collided heavily, emitting a dazzling light. Then, a deafening explosion spread out in all directions. The lightning disappeared, and the star cluster was also shattered, turning into countless streams of light that hit the ground. Han Jin fell down like a stone, and when he touched the ground, his body swayed, and he involuntarily knelt on one knee. Raphael. Yelena was both surprised and happy. She was surprised because Han Jin seemed to be injured, and happy because Han Jin had successfully resisted the magic attack. However, just as she called out Han Jin's name, her face suddenly stiffened. The sky lit up again, and a huge pillar of lightning shot out from the center of the vortex, crashing into the ground. Han Jin pressed his hands against the ground, and his body shot up into the sky like a firework flagship. Following his spell, streams of light drilled out from the ground and condensed into a cluster of nebula, blocking above Han Jin. Boom! In front of the pure and flawless lightning, the nebula seemed very fragile and was instantly smashed into pieces. Han Jin once again fell down like a stone, but this time his body only swayed a little before he stood firmly on the ground. It wasn't because the power of the lightning tribulation had weakened. In fact, the lightning tribulation would only become more powerful each time. The so-called lightning tribulation was to use the power of the lightning tribulation to merge one's spiritual sense with natural treasures. Only in this way could it be possible to refine a real magic weapon or magic weapon. It could also greatly improve the quality of the materials and make the magic weapon more powerful. When Han Jin faced the lightning tribulation for the first time, he only used his spiritual sense to control the nebula, and there was no fusion at all. When the lightning tribulation struck for the second time, he didn't have to deliberately control the nebula, so the pressure on him was much less. Before Han Jin could catch his breath, the third lightning tribulation struck from the sky. This time, even Harley and Hogan were dumbfounded. They knew that Han Jin wanted to use the previous terrible lightning magic to make magic tools. But why was there no end to it? Boom! When the lightning disappeared, the nebula was also blasted away. However, it didn't shatter into pieces, nor did it turn into specks of light and shoot into the ground like the previous few times. Instead, it maintained a fog-like state and surrounded Han Jin. Han Jin's expression became relaxed. Every time he withstood the lightning tribulation, the fusion between his spiritual sense and the stardust gold deepened a little. His magic weapon already had a prototype. Boom! Boom, boom, boom. The lightning tribulation didn't care whether Han Jin could control the stardust gold or not. It fell one after another. Han Jin wasn't the only one who was tested. Major Domo Gale and the others' faces kept changing along with the lightning, especially Yelena. Her fingertips had already sunk deep into Major Domo Gale's arm. The sound of the explosions was transmitted directly to the bottom of her heart, making her feel terrified and uneasy. Han Jin was like a moth flying into a flame. He rushed in the air, smashed down, and rushed up again. His expression was calm, like a leisurely traveler, but his eyes were incomparably tenacious, which meant that he had given it his all. Not good. Majordomo Gale was shocked. He was the most observant among all of them. Han Jin's forehead was oozing with sweat, and his chest was heaving up and down violently. This was a sign that he was nearing his limit. Boom, boom. In the sound of the explosions, Han Jin's body finally staggered, but the next moment he straightened up and shot into the sky before the lightning tribulation fell. Yelena couldn't help but scream when she saw this. Another lightning bolt exploded. When Han Jin landed on the ground, his knees went soft. He hurriedly used his hands to support himself on the ground, to control his body and not let himself fall. This time, Yelena also saw that Han Jin was like an arrow at the end of its flight. She struggled to shake Majordomo Gale's arm, trying to break free. Let me go. Let me go. Calm down, Yelena. Majordomo Gale shouted anxiously. Raphael called all of us here, which means that he has already expected this situation. Trust me, and you have to trust him too. Raphael is not the kind of person who doesn't know when to stop. Yes, Miss Yelena, we will only cause trouble for Master if we go there. Hogan nodded vigorously. You don't know, that kind of magic is very strange. I don't. Yelena's voice was already sobbing. Do you want to kill Raphael? Majordomo Gale shouted. Yelena's body stiffened, and she slowly turned her head to look at Han Jin, who was standing straight again. Go! Han Jin roared. His right hand quickly formed a spell, and the star cluster condensed into a huge ball of light, shooting straight into the sky. Han Jin's body rose from the ground, and he continued to form a spell, following behind the star cluster. He had no other choice. The star cluster might not be able to seal the tribulation thunder, so he could only use his body to resist the remaining power of the tribulation thunder. Otherwise, if the tribulation thunder hit the guiding formation, this refining effort would be in vain. Boom! Something shocking happened. The star cluster turned into countless streams of light and scattered in all directions, just like at the beginning. Han Jin was hit by the tribulation thunder, and he fell straight down like a cannonball, heavily smashing into the ground. Han Jin took a deep breath. He felt a sweet taste in his throat, and blood seeped out of the corner of his mouth. Others didn't know how many times the tribulation thunder had hit him, but he didn't dare to be careless. Among the 36 heavenly spirit cycles, the first tribulation thunder was nothing. Only the last one was the purple heaven tribulation. Success or failure depended entirely on the purple heaven tribulation. However, Han Jin's divine thoughts had been exhausted, and his vital energy was almost exhausted. He had already blessed himself with more than a dozen spirit refreshment spells, but now they didn't have any effect. Therefore, Han Jin's heart sank. The whirlpool shone again. Han Jin spread his arms, and thousands of streamers flew out from the ground, condensed into a star cluster, and shot into the sky. Boom! As everyone expected, Han Jin was blasted back again. He couldn't even control his body, and he fell straight to the ground, splashing sand and stones. Yelena couldn't control her tears anymore, and she even bit her lips. She didn't understand, and she was also somewhat resentful. Why? Why did Han Jin put himself in danger? Han Jin struggled to get up little by little. Majordomo Gale looked up and found that the whirlpool that had shrouded the whole sky had shrunk to a point. He asked in surprise and joy, "Is it over?" "No," Harley replied in a dry and hollow voice. "It's the last." Han Jin stood there, staggering. Blood seeped out of the corner of his mouth and dripped on his chest. His robe had been torn to pieces, revealing the dragon scale armor underneath. He also looked up at the small whirlpool. The world became quieter and quieter, and the pressure in the air became more and more intense. Suddenly, Han Jin waved his hand, and thousands of streamers rose from the ground and shot straight into the sky. Then, Han Jin's right hand moved quickly, and red flying swords appeared out of thin air one after another, turning into waves of swords that flew up one after another. Majordomo Gale and the others had a strange feeling. They were already numb to the sight. The lightning was always striking down from the sky, and Hanjin was always trying to resist, but he could only resist. At this moment, Hanjin seemed to be launching a counterattack. The waves of swords formed pillars that were dozens of meters thick, and they rose abruptly from the ground, like a sharp peak that was about to pierce the sky. They couldn't understand what Hanjin was doing. The whirlpool in the sky became smaller and smaller, and when it shrank to the limit and was about to disappear, a purple lightning pillar suddenly appeared and pressed down from the sky. Majordomo Gale could hardly believe his eyes. It was too fast. The speed of the purple lightning was too fast. Almost at the moment he saw the purple light, the lightning pillar had already bombarded the ground. This speed was simply against the rules. He believed that even a great demon of the abyss who was fully alert would not be able to avoid this attack. The cluster of stars was undoubtedly blown apart, and the waves of swords were also shattered. Hanjin's figure disappeared without a trace. Majordomo Gale gasped, and only then did he feel the violent tremors from the ground. "Let go!" Yelena twisted her body crazily. Majordomo Gale looked up at the sky, and the inexplicable pressure had disappeared. Thinking of what Harley had said just now, he understood that everything was really over, so he let go of Yelena. Yelena immediately released instant transmission and appeared at the place where Hanjin had disappeared. There was a large pit that was nearly 2 meters deep and more than 10 meters wide. Hanjin was lying at the bottom of the pit, and he looked extremely miserable. His lower body was deeply sunk into the ground, and blood was oozing out from the corners of his mouth, nostrils, and eyes. The dragon-scale armor on his body was also torn, and a few broken pieces of armor were swaying around. What scared Yelena was that Hanjin was still motionless, like a dead man. "Raphael!" Yelena screamed, and then rushed forward, desperately clawing at the soil with both hands, trying to dig Hanjin out. Majordomo Gale and Dominguez also appeared at the edge of the pit. They hurriedly jumped into the pit and helped Yelena dig. However, even the combined efforts of Majordomo Gale and Yelena were far less efficient than Dominguez's. Her palms, which were several times larger than an ordinary person's, only needed a few strokes to dig out the dirt on Hanjin's legs. Cough, cough, cough. Hanjin suddenly coughed, and as his throat trembled up and down, he spat out mouthfuls of blood, which happened to stain Yelena's hands red. Yelena's body trembled violently, and she almost fainted on the spot. Hanjin slowly opened his eyes, and seeing Yelena's frightened expression, he reluctantly said, I'm fine." Dominique reached out her hand and grabbed the chain in front of Hanjin's chest. With a slight tug, she pulled Hanjin out of the pit. Yelena violently pushed Dominique away, threw herself into Hanjin's arms, and burst into tears. "I'm fine." Hanjin gently patted Yelena's shoulder and said in a weak voice, "Let me get up, or I'll really be in trouble." Yelena barely held back her sobs, wiped away her tears, and leaned over to carefully support Hanjin. She helped Hanjin up. The blood and dust on her hands smeared her face, but she didn't have the energy to care. Even if there was a mirror in front of her, she wouldn't care about her sorry state. Is it necessary to work so hard just to make a magic prop? Majordomo Gale couldn't help but ask. There's not much time left. Hanjin smiled, but his smile was no better than his crying face. There's not much time left. Majordomo Gale asked in surprise. Yes, Hanjin replied softly, but he didn't explain. Majordomo Gale saw that Hanjin was avoiding the question, so he stopped asking. He looked around and asked, "Did you fail?" Of course, there was a possibility of failure when making a magic prop, not to mention that Hanjin's magic was so powerful. It was conceivable that he was trying to make a similarly powerful magic prop, so the possibility of failure should be very high. It was just such a pity. Hanjin's efforts were wasted. Hanjin didn't answer, but slowly stretched out his hand. Looking down from the sky, it could be seen that a purple light curtain suddenly appeared around Hanjin, covering an area of dozens of meters. Hanjin raised his hand little by little, and the light curtain shrank toward Hanjin like a tide, condensing into a purple sphere in Hanjin's hand. This is... Majordomo Gale stared at the purple light ball. Is that star gold? It doesn't look like it. The star gold was golden, but the stars that made up the ball of light were all purple, exactly the same as the lightning. What was even stranger was that although it was only a few inches in radius, it gave people a feeling that it was endless, with no end in sight. Countless purple stars twinkled one after another, deep and poignant. Majordomo Gale could be considered to have seen a lot, but he could not identify what kind of magic prop this was. Hogan had bought nearly 50 kilograms of meteoric iron, plus star gold, so there shouldn't be so little left. You don't have to help me. I can do it myself. Hanjin gently pushed Yelena away and pressed his left hand on the purple ball of light. He then pulled his hands apart, and the purple ball of light turned into a shining long sword in front of everyone's eyes. However, the luster of the sword remained the same. Congratulations, you finally have your own magic sword again, Dominique said slowly. Majordomo Gale's expression was a bit dull. He reached out his hand, but immediately sobered up. He coughed dryly and pulled his hand back. The long sword was very strange. It looked like it was real, but also like an illusory shadow. He almost used his own fingers to verify what was going on. Magic sword. Hanjin smiled and continued to pull with his hands. The long sword was slowly pulled into a war spear, and then he pushed it down. With a poof, the spear's handle was deeply inserted into the ground. So, it's a magic war spear? Hanjin put his hands together, and the war spear was pulled short again. In Hanjin's hands, it turned into a magic wand. Everyone was very familiar with it. It was Yelena's golden melon hammer, but in a different color. Huh, Master, I could do it too. Harley laughed strangely. Get out of my way, Hanjin scolded. Harley laughed even more happily. He could hear that Hanjin's voice was full of joy, and he didn't really blame him. All right, I almost forgot. Hanjin suddenly grabbed Yelena's left hand. The handle of the magic wand had become sharp. He gently stabbed it down, and the handle pierced Yelena's index finger. The end of the wand flashed red, and then it returned to its original state. Hanjin then noticed what Yelena's left hand had become. At least 2 of her fingernails were broken, and blood was seeping out of them. Her right hand was probably not much better than her left hand. This proved how much strength she had used to dig the soil. Hanjin couldn't help but sigh. You little fool. Yelena wanted to say something, but her eyes suddenly widened. She suddenly realized that there was an indescribable connection between her and the magic wand. This feeling was similar to when she had obtained the phoenix. It can encompass heaven and earth, and as small as the sand of the Ganges River. It is ever-changing and endless, just like the heavenly axiom, Hanjin said slowly. Then from today onwards, I will call you the heavenly axiom. As he said this, his heart ached because he thought of his master's magic weapon, the Rui scepter. As soon as Hanjin finished speaking, the purple stars trembled in unison, and then turned into a ribbon that slowly wrapped around Hanjin's waist. What kind of magic tool is this? What is it for? The more Majordomo Gale looked, the more shocked he became. It's everything, and it's nothing. Hanjin smiled. Let's go back. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chijian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 382. Hanjin lay weakly on the bed. He had lost too much energy, and it would take at least a few days for him to recover to his peak condition. Yelena sat at the head of the bed and whispered something to him. Ever since they had returned to the god of war, Yelena's little mouth had never stopped talking. She was always complaining that Hanjin had taken too many risks and was too reckless. Hanjin had never realized that Yelena had such potential in this area. However, when he saw Yelena's bandaged fingers, he couldn't say anything and could only silently listen to Yelena's teachings. It was said that no one knew a son better than his father, and there was a certain truth to this saying. Solomon had once said that Yelena's achievements today were not only due to her natural interest in magic, but also because she wanted to be recognized by others. The world was made up of intertwined desires. One desire was restrained by another, and one desire was devoured by another. Yelena wanted to learn how to control her power, not to restrain or devour anyone. To put it bluntly, she lacked the essential elements of a strong person. However, no matter how dangerous the outcome was, Hanjin would still do it. If you want to do a good job, you must first sharpen your tools. Although Solomon had taught him the technique of using his mind power, he could not release all of his combat power with just this one technique. If he encountered a real, super strong person, he would inevitably be overwhelmed. Did you not listen? Yelena said angrily. She was angry at Hanjin's risk, and she was angry at herself because she realized that she was too stupid. In order to make magic props, Hanjin had called Major Domo Gale and Dominique. At first, Yelena did not think much of it, but later she realized that Hanjin had already expected that he would be exhausted, so he had found a few more bodyguards. In fact, Hanjin really could not move. It was the tall and strong Dominique who carried Hanjin back. Yelena wanted to take this job on herself, but unfortunately, she was too weak to carry Hanjin. She could only stare at him helplessly. What? Hanjin was in the middle of sketching out a huge conspiracy that would involve almost all forces. His mind was wandering, and he didn't hear what Yelena was saying. Besides, it was enough to hear the same sentence a few times. No one would be able to stand it if they heard it dozens of times. I knew it. Out of habit, she used her injured finger to poke Hanjin. As a result, nothing happened to Hanjin, but she cried out in pain. Come, let me have a look. Hanjin hurriedly grabbed Yelena's hand. I can't use any magic now, otherwise. All right, take care of yourself. Yelena pulled her hand back and looked at Hanjin with resentment. What if something really happens to you? How am I supposed to? At this moment, the door was pushed open and Guevara walked in with a strange expression. Raphael, someone is here to see you. Following Guevara's voice, Jeds slowly walked into the room. His expression was as calm as before as he silently looked at Hanjin. Jeds, why are you here? Hanjin smiled. It seems that the news of my injury has spread throughout the city. Major Domo Gale told me. Jeds replied softly. Come, have a seat. Hanjin slowly stretched out his hand and pointed to the chair. Jeds slowly walked over. He was not in a hurry to sit down, and his eyes swept over Yelena. Yelena, you go out first. Hanjin understood Jed's intention. Yelena was stunned. I have some private matters to discuss with Jeds. Hanjin winked at Yelena. What private matters? And you don't want me to hear? Yelena stood up reluctantly and glanced at Jeds with her beautiful eyes. She suddenly said, You guys talk first. Raphael, I'll wait for you outside. Guevara saw that Hanjin wanted to talk about private matters, so he didn't stay and followed Yelena out of the room. Our future First Lady is a little worried about me, Jed said faintly. You're overthinking it. Hanjin smiled. Jed sighed. Whether I'm overthinking it or not, we'll talk about it later. However, I broke my promise. Broke your promise? I was supposed to preside over Stilberg's wedding, and I promised him. It's nothing. Hanjin pondered for a moment. I can understand you. You have to understand even if you don't. Jed's tone suddenly became heavy, and then he sat down on the chair. After holding it in for 2 whole days, he finally couldn't hold it in anymore. His eyes were almost spitting fire. Do you know how much pressure I'm under? I've known you for so long, and I've never seen you angry. Hanjin smiled. Looking at you now, I really feel a sense of accomplishment. Don't tell me that you hurt odds so badly for some **T sense of accomplishment. Jeds snorted coldly. He was not only angry, but he was also swearing. You should know why I did it, Jeds, Hanjin said softly. Jeds paused, then slowly lowered his head. After a while, he said word by word, But I don't understand. Why odd? Hanjin pondered, but he didn't answer. Jed's words had many meanings, and he didn't know what Jed's wanted to know. Adonis is cunning, and although Amijay is young, he is also very shrewd. Aud is upright and resolute, and not good at scheming. Among the three Holy Knight, Aud is the least likely to be a threat to you. Jed said slowly, "But why did you have to deal with him?" Hanjin was silent for a long time. "Because I need a strong holy sea." "You need a strong holy sea?" Jeds didn't believe him. "I'm telling the truth," Hanjin said indifferently. "I can't do what the holy sea can do, and you can't do what I can do. I need you, just like you need my support." Jeds was also silent. After a while, he slowly said, "Okay, I can believe you, but that's not a reason for you to deal with Aud. You just said that Aud is upright and resolute. Upright means that he's not flexible enough and doesn't know how to turn around. Resolute means that he'd rather break than bend and will never back down. So he'll be an obstacle, not just for me, but also for you." Hanjin smiled. "Just because of this reason, which isn't really a reason, you decided his future?" Jeds asked. "It seems that among the three Holy Knight, you admire Aud the most. Why?" "Because he's a true, pure Holy Knight. Unfortunately, he won't be your sword." Hanjin smiled. "Ha! Upright and resolute, unafraid of power, unafraid of sacrifice. What a great character. He has all the characteristics of sacrifice, you know? Only an ambitious person can perfectly control him. And you, Jeds, you're a believer who lacks ambition, so you don't have the right to use him. You want your companions to learn how to reflect, to find a new path for the Holy Sea through constant reflection. But what Aud doesn't need the most is thinking. He only needs passion, struggle, and to move himself and yearn to sacrifice for his beliefs. Jeds, he'll stand against you sooner or later." Jeds took a deep breath, his eyes flickering. "I'll repeat it again. I need a strong holy sea." Hanjin said slowly. "So, I don't want to make a big deal out of this. Jeds, according to your idea, I should deal with Adonis or Amij. Then if I really did severely injure Adonis or Amij, what'd Aud do now?" Jeds suddenly understood. He wasn't stupid. On the contrary, being able to be promoted to Archbishop, second only to the Pope, and take charge of the Supreme Court of Inquisition before the age of 30 was the most effective proof of his wisdom and ability. It was just that he had been under too much pressure recently and had too many trivial matters to deal with, so he didn't think too deeply about it. Now that Hanjin had pointed it out, he immediately reacted. Aud was severely injured, and although he was under extensive pressure from the Holy See, he was still able to control the situation. If Amij and Adonis were injured, the situation might have gone out of control on the day of the attack. Even if he could control the Light Knight Order, Aud could take a few of his trusted knights and privately seek revenge on Hanjin's people. If that happened, Jeds would be in an extremely awkward situation. Hanjin wouldn't tolerate such an attack and would definitely punish Aud. What would Jeds choose? If he gave up on Aud and continued to work toward the tacit agreement he had with Hanjin, he would be isolated by the entire Holy See. If he tried his best to protect Aud, he would most likely split with Hanjin and even become a mortal enemy. Isn't the situation now good? Hanjin smiled and said, "Adonis and Amij are smart people, so they won't stand up for Aud. At least, they won't do anything unless there's a good opportunity. Haha, it's scary but not dangerous." "Won't do anything?" Jed smiled bitterly. You didn't see how angry they were. Aud was so miserable, so of course they had put on an act. Otherwise, what would the Light Knight think of them? Hanjin said softly, "They might even ask you to take a tough stance, but that's just talk. If you suddenly change your mind and decide to be with me, haha, they'll try their best to dissuade you, believe it or not." "You know them well," Jed said in a helpless tone. "I heard. Amij has been very close to you recently?" "Yes, I've been trying to win him over." "You?" The bitter smile on Jed's face became even more intense. "Can you not be so honest? If you deny it, I'll feel better in my heart. You won't lie to me, so I'll try my best not to lie to you." Hanjin smiled. "This is a form of respect I have for you. Try your best." Jeds rolled his eyes. In other words, you'll still lie when you think it's necessary? Well, there's nothing wrong with an appropriate lie. You said it just now, so you'll feel better, won't you? Okay, I won't talk about this with you. I've found that you're becoming more and more difficult to deal with. Jeds shook his head helplessly, but I'll ask you one last time. Do you really need a strong holy sea? Yes. Why? Jed stared at Hanjin. I don't care about the future. I just hope that you don't care about my feelings now. I just want to hear the truth. Hanjin pondered for a moment, then said softly, if my goal is only here, or Depew City and Cold Shadow City, then I don't need you, because I can achieve my dreams with my own abilities. If my goal is the entire continent, then I can't leave you. Are you satisfied with this explanation? Is it just a need? Jeds suddenly spoke very slowly. Then, one day in the future, when all of your dreams have been realized, where will the Holy Sea go? Have you thought about it? That's a long, long time from now. Hanjin smiled. In such a long time, we'll find a suitable way to cooperate, one where we can trust each other completely. At the very least, we won't be a threat to each other. We have many opponents, and in every battle, some of us will die or die trying to protect each other. I have enough reason to believe that we'll forge a friendship through blood and fire that will surpass even that of family. Jeds, people have feelings. You have them, and so do I. When the time comes, no one will allow me to do anything I want. Feelings are probably the most unreliable thing, Jed sighed. For some people, that's true. Hanjin said softly, these people's lives are sad. They're unwilling to give, unwilling to trust others, so they can't gain the trust of others. You're not that kind of person? Jeds laughed. Hanjin shrugged and didn't answer. Morrison's and the others are useless to you now, but I can see that you're good to them. Jed slowly stood up, so I believe in you. After saying that, Jeds walked towards the door. He had said what he needed to say. As for the pleasantries, they were superfluous to him and Hanjin. Jeds, I know you have a heavy burden on your shoulders. Just hold on for a while longer. Hanjin said with a smile. Then, everything will be solved. What do you mean? Jeds turned his head and asked in surprise. The best way to resolve a conflict is to pass it on. For example, let everyone see a huge threat. Threat? Where does this threat come from? Jeds heard Hanjin's words. Hanjin stretched out his finger and pointed downwards. The abyss world? Jed's eyes suddenly widened. Yes, I understand. Jeds let out a long sigh. I've been wondering how you ended up like this because of a magic item. Ha! I finally understand. Jeds, we don't have to wait much longer, Hanjin whispered. Jeds slowly nodded, then turned around and opened the door. He didn't have eyes behind his back, so he couldn't see that Hanjin's eyes were full of guilt. What Hanjin had said before was from the bottom of his heart. He had never lied to Jeds, but what he was about to do was a different matter. Almost at the same time as Jed's figure disappeared, Yelena rushed in from the outside. She was relieved to see that Hanjin was safe and sound. She couldn't be blamed for being suspicious. Hanjin had seriously injured Aud and was now very weak. She was very worried that Jeds would have evil intentions. What did you talk about? Yelena asked as she sat on the bed. Some things between men. I don't want to know. Yelena said coquettishly. Then why did you ask? Hanjin laughed. Yelena twisted her body in a fit of pique and shifted her gaze in the opposite direction. Her meaning was obvious. I'm ignoring you. Hanjin pulled Yelena's hand and smiled. Come, I'll whisper it to you. Yelena's pouting mouth immediately opened, and she put her ear close to him with a smile. At this moment, Guevara's voice came from outside the door. Raphael, the guardian is here to see you. So annoying. Yelena was extremely disappointed and stomped her feet hatefully. Guevara and Shazos walked into the room one after the other. It was unknown if they had heard Yelena's complaints, but with their shrewdness, they certainly wouldn't take such things to heart. Guevara waved his hand. Yelena, come with me. After that, he looked at Hanjin with an inquiring gaze. He wanted to know if Hanjin had the ability to protect himself. Although it was unlikely that Shazos would hurt Hanjin, he was still an outsider. There are a lot of guests today, Han Jin said softly. Yelena, go out for a moment. Yelena was very dissatisfied. She had been kicked out twice in such a short time. Anyone would be angry, but Yelena wouldn't throw a tantrum in front of third person. Shazos wasn't Jed's, so she had to control herself. She couldn't let others see Han Jin as a joke, so she obediently responded and followed him out of the room. I heard that you were injured, so of course I came to see you. Shazot smiled and said, How are you? Are your injuries serious? He had a smile on his face, but in his heart, he was anxious. He had never met such a person before. He accepted the gift, but he didn't make the promise that he should have made. This is too evil, especially today, when he learned that Han Jin had successfully made Stardust Gold into a magical prop and was injured because of it. He couldn't hold it in anymore. He had to come and ask. He didn't care about the Stardust Gold, but the key was that he couldn't stand being fooled by a human. It's okay, my recovery ability has always been good. Han Jin paused. His brain was running fast, and finally he decided to come straight to the point. I know why you're looking for me. Huh? I didn't come to see you these days because I don't think I need to express my attitude. The facts have proven everything. Facts? Shazos was puzzled. I'll be honest with you. The messenger of Dragon City has arrived at the Holy Crown City. Do you know what this means? Han Jin said slowly. The gap between the monthly votes is getting bigger and bigger. Everyone who has a guaranteed monthly vote, please support me. Thank you very much. Now 1 vote is equal to 2 votes, which is more than double the gap. If this continues, the first few days of May can be declared a failure. Chapter 383. Dragon City's Emissary? Shazos was shocked. Soon after, his gaze became piercingly cold. He calmly looked at Han Jin, and an invisible pressure pervaded the room. He had already shown enough sincerity. Even when facing Grand Duke Solomon in the elemental capital, his attitude would not be as tactful as it was now. Grand Duke Solomon was a smart person, and smart people naturally knew how to choose. There was no need for him to deliberately guide Grand Duke Solomon. It could be said that if Han Jin was not so young, and if Han Jin's temper was not so irritable, perhaps Shazos would have changed to another method long ago. Young people were always insensible. He was worried that Han Jin would affect or even destroy his overall plan due to a moment of impulse. So he had repeatedly made concessions and expressed goodwill again and again. Towards Han Jin, Shazos, could be considered as being extremely benevolent. Who would have thought that Han Jin would actually contact Dragon City behind his back? This was simply toying with him. He could not bear it any longer. However, Dragon City sending an emissary over is meaningless, Han Jin said with a smile. Oh, Shazos casually replied. His expression eased, and he revealed an impeccable smile. However, his mind was rapidly considering whether or not he should take advantage of this opportunity to get rid of this young suzerain. Although the other party possessed unfathomable strength and had once killed Dragon City's Elder Maxwell while being sealed, he was currently injured and in a very weak state. If he suddenly made a move, what were the chances of success? Peace and cooperation were nothing more than a mask. He did not mind tearing off the mask. I have a habit. Han Jin did not see the conflict in Shazos's mind and continued to speak, minding his own business. Habit. I will not rashly provoke anyone. It can also be said that my offensive power is not strong. If anyone wants to harm me, no problem. Feel free to come, but you must kill me. As long as you leave me with a single breath, Han Jin laughed. My revenge will not rest until one of us is dead. I, Raphael, will never compromise or forgive. Shazos was shocked again. He felt that those words were meant for him, but it didn't make sense. Shazos thought that he hid it well. If he couldn't even control his expression, how could he become the guardian of the dragon field? Before the elves started the war, I never thought of harming the elves. After the elves started the war, I also never thought of harming the giant dragons of Dragon City. Of course, I killed a few of them, but this is war. If I didn't attack them, they would still attack me. I don't think I did anything wrong. The giant dragons that Dragon City sent to the elves are all inferior green dragons. Hee hee. With my strength, if I really wanted to do something, they would have been killed by me long ago. Shazos nodded silently. He didn't think that Han Jin was talking nonsense. The young man in front of him was qualified to say such things. However, Shazos didn't know that Han Jin's word were wrong. At this moment, Han Jin certainly had the ability to deal with those green dragons, but when the war had just broken out, he could only use surprise attacks to attack the green dragons that were alone. If Shazos understood Han Jin's thirst for dragon blood, he could immediately expose Han Jin's lies. Unfortunately, he had just begun to interact with Han Jin. I was so patient, but I didn't get peace. Instead, Dragon City thought that I was a weak person who could be bullied. Han Jin sneered. So, when Maxwell came, I admit that was my most dangerous moment. I was almost killed, and so was Yelena. No, she's already dead. If she hadn't signed a contract with the immortal bird, this kind and beautiful girl would have become a cold tombstone by now. Shazos continued to remain silent. Dragon City has given me so many unforgettable memories. How could I maintain peace with them? Huh? Han Jin couldn't help but laugh. More than a year ago, Zagund retreated to the underground city. Although he lost all his territory on the surface, his strength wasn't greatly reduced. The organization of his army was still intact, and he had the help of the blood clans Alquite. The 7 abyssal demons, Whip and his brothers, were also willing to pledge their loyalty to Zagund. His strength was the strongest among the nearby lords, at least much stronger than Dismark. The underground city he hid in was also a place that was easy to defend and difficult to attack. Ha! Do you know why I had to attack him first? Because he once hurt you? He killed a good friend of mine, Han Jin said softly. Shazot sighed. He could see that the sadness and sorrow in Han Jin's eyes came from the bottom of his heart. There was absolutely no pretense. After a moment, Han Jin turned his gaze to Shazot's. These days, I didn't see you because I really had some things to do. Another reason was that I didn't feel the need to express my attitude. That would be too nauseating. I wouldn't cooperate with Dragon City, even if a butcher's knife was placed on my neck. Then, I only have one choice left, which is the Dragon City that you represent. Of course, if your conditions aren't too harsh. The way you express your sincerity, I really can't understand. Shazos smiled bitterly, but his expression gradually eased. Han Jin's original choice had indeed left a huge mystery. It was common sense to avoid the strong and favor the weak, but Han Jin turned a blind eye to Dismark and clung to Zagund. Zagund retreated into the underground city, and Han Jin led the army underground. It should be known that the races on the surface weren't good at fighting in the Abyss world. Han Jin's choice was too stubborn and irrational. Now, he finally found the answer. It was just because of personal hatred. In addition, Han Jin and Yelena almost died in the hands of Maxwell. Shazos analyzed carefully. Han Jin's words were very credible, and it was impossible for him to cooperate with Dragon City. Moreover, it was consistent with Solomon's previous judgment. The young man in front of him was emotional and impulsive. But since you hate Dragon City so much, why did you contact Dragon City? Without your permission, how could their messengers come to the Holy Crown City? Unless you have made a guarantee that they are safe. Shazos asked slowly. It seems that I have to clarify. Han Jin smiled. Before you came to the Holy Crown City, I had already contacted Dragon City. At that time, I didn't have any impression of the Dragon City, and I didn't think that you would help me. Shazos pondered for a moment. He had only been in the Holy Crown City for a few days, and the messengers of Dragon City had also followed him here, which proved that Han Jin didn't lie. Dragon City was very far from the Holy Crown City. Even with the speed of dragon, it would take a long time to arrive here. You haven't explained why you contacted Dragon City? Have you given up the hatred in your heart? Ho ho, I can't let go of the blood debt. At least I can't. Han Jin said lightly. This is just a trap. A trap? I killed Maxwell, Of course Dragon City will retaliate. I also know that the Holy Crown City can't resist the power of Dragon City. Hanjin said softly, since they will come here sooner or later, I'd better lure them here first so that I can take the initiative. And then, you don't have to be so direct. Hanjin smiled. Those elders of Dragon City won't be fooled easily. What reason did you use to persuade them? Shazos changed the topic. I don't want to talk about this, and it's not important. Hanjin said slowly. What's important is that I think we should change the way of cooperation. What way? Yelena walked back and forth in the corridor anxiously. She had been walking like this for a long time. It was already noon, and everyone had already had lunch, but Shazos, the guardian of the dragon realm, still hadn't come out. Yelena's heart was hanging in the air. She couldn't figure out what could make Hanjin and Shazos talk for the whole morning. Could it be that, when Hanjin was weak, Shazos suddenly? The more she thought about it, the more scared she became. Finally, she couldn't stand it anymore. She walked to Hanjin's door, tentatively knocked twice, and then pushed the door open. Nothing had happened. Hanjin and Shazos were talking, one lying on the bed and the other sitting. Sacrifice is inevitable. If you don't pay, how can you get anything? Hanjin said as he looked at Yelena. He nodded and gestured for her to come over. Then he shifted his gaze to Shazos. Moreover, I have this ability, and I have the full support of Grand Duke Solomon. Compared to Nicholas, who your dragon realm admires. Forget it. Let's not talk about him. I don't want to belittle others to elevate myself. Hanjin kept saying that he didn't want to belittle others to elevate himself, but the arrogance on his face was enough to prove how much he disdained Nicholas. Raphael, you should rest, Yelena whispered. She was a little worried that Hanjin would blame her for interfering. Not bad, not bad. Shazos showed a look of appreciation. It seemed that he was very satisfied with this conversation, and he also thought highly of Hanjin. In fact, Shazos pitied Hanjin in his heart. He could already make a comprehensive judgment of the young man in front of him. He had the ability, strength, and a flexible mind. These were all true. Otherwise, this young man couldn't have come up with such an incredible plan. But his shortcomings were also obvious. He was not steady enough, and he was easily impulsive. Like many whimsical young people, he was self-righteous. He kept saying that Solomon would help him with this and that, and even give up the benefits of the capital of elements to help him with the process of Hanjin's plan. At that time, Shazos really wanted to laugh out loud. Who do you think you are? A lord who only occupied a small Holy Crown city wanted to order Grand Duke Solomon around as a hired thug. How ridiculous! What's more, from Solomon's words, he could see that Solomon had other plans for the future of the capital of elements. As for Hanjin's disdain for Nicholas, Shazos felt even more ridiculous. Shazos had dealt with Nicholas before, and it could be said that the process of dealing with Nicholas was very smooth. Both sides were rational enough to understand that only by compromising with each other could they achieve a win-win situation. However, Nicholas was the strongest human being that Shazos was most afraid of. Smooth didn't mean easy. On the contrary, Shazos was mentally and physically exhausted. In the end, he had to let Harriet replace him. During the days when he was with Nicholas, he suffered every day. No matter what he said or did, he always had to think it over and over again before he dared to implement it. A little carelessness would give Nicholas a chance. He also had a taste of it. It was as if he was locked in an invisible prison, which was very uncomfortable. Shazos really wanted to tell the young man in front of him loudly, maybe your strength is close to Nicholas, or even surpass him, but Nicholas is much smarter than you. You don't have the qualifications to look down on Nicholas. Of course, Shazos wouldn't say anything. He and Hanjin only had a relationship of using each other. He didn't have the obligation to teach him. Moreover, letting a talented, strong, and smart young man continue to be arrogant and impulsive was in line with the interests of the Dragonfield. It was a pity that Shazos didn't have the power to see through souls. Otherwise, he would have discovered that Hanjin's soul was grinning maliciously The performances of the two opponents were very interesting. One was full of compassion as he reprimanded the chaotic continent and described his own ideals. The other was not stingy with his appreciation and always spoke a few words at the right time. Both sides were equally sincere. Their eyes, faces, and even the movements of their bodies were so natural. There were no signs of pretense. However, what they were thinking in their hearts, only they knew. Shazos slowly stood up and looked at Han Jin, a smile blooming at the corner of his mouth. Well, you've just been injured, so I won't disturb you anymore. Han Jin nodded and looked at Shazos quietly. He also smiled back. There was no need to say anything. Everything was in this smile of consensus. Then, Shazos turned around and walked towards the door. Yelena watched Shazos' back disappear. She leaned against Han Jin and complained, "What did you talk about? You talked for so long." "Fate," Han Jin replied in a low and powerful voice. "Fate." Yelena's eyes widened. "You'll understand in the future." Han Jin smiled and then took Yelena's hand. "You've been waiting outside the whole time." "Yes." Yelena pursed her lips. "Why didn't you do something else? Were you afraid that something would happen to me? What do you think?" Yelena nodded. "I really don't know what you're thinking. You're already like this, and you still dare to talk to that guy alone. Aren't you worried?" "I can't kill him here unless he destroys the god of war first." Han Jin replied with a smile. After a long time, everyone had lost interest in the god of war. They thought it was just a huge ship that could fly and had a certain level of defense. They didn't know that it was Han Jin's magic item. How magical. Are you telling me that I was worried about you for nothing?" "This." Han Jin paused and changed the topic. "Yelena, I feel that you've changed." "How have I changed?" Yelena asked in surprise. "In the past, whenever you had a little free time, you would run to the magic laboratory, huh?" Yelena blushed. She was indeed not as obsessed with magic as before. In other words, she felt that studying Han Jin was much more interesting than studying magic runes. "Come." Han Jin moved in. "Lie down with me for a while and talk." "Of course not. What would others think if they saw us like this?" Yelena said coquettishly. "I'm going to ignore you. I'm in the laboratory." Han Jin laughed loudly and pulled hard. Yelena couldn't help but fall into Han Jin's body. She struggled symbolically for a while before she stopped moving. She didn't mean what she said just now because she was a reserve girl. Now, Han Jin was violently pulling her down. She couldn't resist, so this was the only way. Han Jin presided over Stillberg's wedding yesterday and deliberately went to be struck by lightning at night. After he was carried back, he adjusted his breath to recover his energy. In the morning, Jedis came to visit, followed by the guardian of the dragon realm, Shazos. He was very tired after all this. Hugging Yelena, her refreshing and quiet body fragrance made him feel very comfortable. Not long after, he gradually fell asleep. Yelena really wanted to talk to Han Jin, but she didn't sleep. Seeing that Han Jin had fallen asleep, she felt her eyelids getting heavier and heavier. After a while, she closed her eyes and fell asleep. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Han Jin slept until dusk. Without leaving the room, he could sense the sky outside. He gently woke Yelena up, and the two of them left the room hand in hand. Yelena no longer refused to do some intimate actions with Han Jin in public, such as holding hands or holding arms. However, she still couldn't go any further, not even after they were married. When they came to the corridor, Han Jin couldn't help but be stunned. At the other end of the corridor stood soldiers. They were all generals of Riptide and Mountain Core. What happened? Han Jin hurriedly pulled Yelena over. "Sir." When the generals saw Han Jin, they all bowed. "What's the matter?" Han Jin asked. "Sir, there's a letter from the elves," the general replied. "Oh." Han Jin pondered for a moment. He reached out and pushed the door open, then strode in. There were many people in the room. Shazos wasn't invited, and Dominique was restricted by her physical condition. Other than the two of them, almost everyone who had their own room on the God of War was present. This was a core meeting. To be more specific, it was about strategic issues. The generals were not qualified to attend. "Raphael, you're awake. You came at the right time." Guevara smiled. "From last night until now, He hadn't asked about Han Jin's injuries. It wasn't that he didn't care about Han Jin, but this old general believed that if a man couldn't even take care of himself, he wouldn't be able to take care of his family, friends, citizens, army, and territory. He believed that Han Jin could recover quickly. Yelena immediately blushed and rolled her eyes at Guevara. Guevara knew that Han Jin was sleeping, so he must have entered Han Jin's room. Of course, he must have seen her. How could he not knock on the door? Han Jin's gaze fell on Constance. Obviously, she was the one who sent the news. Constance's expression was a little awkward. At first, Han Jin wanted to let her go, but she didn't understand Han Jin's intentions and volunteered to become his slave in exchange for the freedom of the other elven prisoners of war. Now, should she call him master or sir? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.